Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see what if Naruto awakened the sun god Nika fruit before Luffy and fell in love with Yuta. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1, The Boy with the Sun in His Heart. The alley stank of old rain and resentment. It was a familiar perfume in the forgotten corners of the village, hidden in the leaves, a place Naruto Uzumaki knew better than the sunlit main streets. Three men blocked the only exit, their forms silhouetted against the bright promise of the open market just beyond. One was a Chunin, judging by the flak jacket, his arms crossed with the easy confidence of a predator that had its prey cornered. The other two were just villagers, but their faces were twisted into the same ugly mask of hate. "Nowhere left to run, demon," the Chunin growled, his voice a low rumble. He hadn't drawn a weapon. He didn't think he needed one. Naruto, all of 10 years old, just stood there, his hands shoved in the pockets of his worn orange jacket. He wasn't trembling. He wasn't crying. He was watching them with eyes as blue as a cloudless sky, an unnerving calm radiating from him that only seemed to stoke their anger. "I was just buying groceries," Naruto said, his voice even. He held up a mesh bag containing a single, slightly bruised apple and a carton of milk. "I'm not looking for trouble." "You are trouble," one of the villagers spat, taking a step forward. "You breathe, and it's trouble. My business has been failing for a year. It started the day you walked past my shop. You're a curse." Naruto's expression didn't change. He'd heard it all before. Curses, bad luck, blight on the harvest. He was the scapegoat for every misfortune that befell this village, a living receptacle for their fear and pain. It used to make him angry, then sad. Now, it mostly made him tired. But beneath the weariness, something else was stirring. A low, rhythmic hum deep in his chest. Doo-doo thump. Doo-doo thump. It was a beat only he could hear, a playful, insistent pulse that grew stronger whenever his emotions ran high. It wasn't the guttural rage of the monster sealed within him, he knew that presence well, a simmering ocean of hatred in the back of his mind. This was different. This was bouncy. "Just let me go," Naruto said, a little more firmly this time. The Chunin laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Let you go? After what your kind did to my family? To the fourth Hokage?" He finally reached for the kunai on his thigh. The metal scraped against its holster, a sound that promised violence. "The third is too soft on you. Some of us still remember what justice looks like." The two villagers fanned out, their knuckles white as they clenched their fists. The alley was a tomb, and they were the pallbearers. Naruto's eyes darted from one man to the next. He could feel the familiar spike of adrenaline, the desperate urge to survive. But the rhythm in his chest was getting faster now, louder. Doo-doo thump thump do thump. It felt like a laugh was bubbling up from his soul. The Chunin lunged. Naruto's body moved before his mind did, a pure, instinctual reaction. He sidestepped, but his foot landed strangely. The grimy cobblestone beneath his sandal didn't feel hard. It felt pliant. Giddy. It gave way like a trampoline, and the sudden springiness sent him careening sideways. He slammed into the brick wall of the alley, bracing for impact. Thwomp. His head recoiled, but not with the sharp crack of skull against brick. The wall dented around him, stretching like taut leather before flinging him back out. He tumbled through the air, a whirlwind of orange and blonde, a surprised "whoa" escaping his lips. The three men froze, their faces a mask of utter confusion. "What the villager on the left stammered. Naruto landed on his feet, his knees bending deeply. The ground beneath him felt like rubber again. He could feel it, a strange, tactile connection to the world around him, as if his own body's properties were bleeding into it. The joyful rhythm in his chest was a full-blown drum solo now, a wild, chaotic beat that demanded movement. A grin spread across his face. It wasn't his usual mischievous smirk. This was wider, more manic, stretching his features into something almost inhuman. It felt as natural as breathing. "My turn," he chirped. He stomped his foot. Not a bone-jarring impact, but a deep, resonant bang. A wave of elasticity shot through the alley floor. The Chunin, mid-charge, suddenly found the ground turning to jelly beneath his feet. His disciplined, forward momentum became a comical, flailing dance. His arms windmilled as he tried to keep his balance, his expression of grim determination melting into pure panic. "It's rubber," the other villager yelled, his feet sliding out from under him. He went down hard, his head bouncing off the now soft ground with a dull, harmless thud. Naruto pushed off the springy surface, launching himself into the air. He spun, his limbs feeling loose and untethered, and delivered a kick to the Chunin's chest. But it wasn't a normal kick. His leg stretched, elongating by an extra 2 feet, the motion fluid and impossible. The sole of his sandal connected with the man's flak jacket with the force of a battering ram, but the impact was bizarrely soft, like being hit with a giant water balloon. The Chunin flew backward, not with a cry of pain, but a great whoosh of expelled air. He slammed into the far end of the alley, which also turned to rubber on impact, and stuck there for a second, his body splayed like a starfish, before peeling off and flopping to the ground in a heap. The last man standing stared, his jaw hanging open. He looked at his unconscious friends, at the weirdly wobbling walls, and then at the grinning boy who was now bouncing gently on the balls of his feet, the very air around him seeming to vibrate with a playful energy. The villager's hatred was washed away by a flood of primal, superstitious terror. He scrambled backward, crab-walking over his friend's limp body before finding his feet and sprinting away, screaming about demons and witchcraft. The alley slowly returned to normal. The walls firmed up, the ground settled back into hard, unforgiving stone. The rhythm in Naruto's chest subsided to a gentle, happy hum. He looked at the 2 unconscious men, then at his own hands. He wiggled his fingers. They felt normal. He didn't understand what had just happened. He never did. It just happened. When he was scared, when he was cornered, when the beat in his chest got loud enough. The world would stop making sense, and he would come out on top, usually leaving a trail of baffled people behind him. A wide, genuine smile lit up his face. He let out a small, airy laugh. Whatever this power was, it was his. He picked up his fallen bag, checked that the milk carton hadn't burst, and strolled out of the alley, whistling a jaunty, tuneless melody. He didn't notice the crystalline orb on a nearby rooftop, through which an old man with tired eyes and a heavy heart had watched the entire exchange. The third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, let out a long, weary sigh, the smoke from his pipe curling up to the ceiling of his office like a departing soul. In the crystal ball before him, the image of Naruto walking away, blissfully unaware, finally faded. "The manifestations are becoming more frequent," a cold, detached voice said from the shadows of the room. "And more powerful." Danzo Shimura stepped into the light, one eye covered by bandages, the other sharp and calculating. His arm was in a sling, a permanent fixture, but his presence filled the room with a chilling stillness. He hadn't been looking at the ball, he had been watching Hiruzen. He turned a solid brick wall into a membrane, Hiruzen, Danzo continued, his tone flat. He altered the physical properties of an entire alleyway. This is not some advanced ninjutsu. It is not a Kekkei Genkai. This is something other. It is a part of him, Hiruzen countered, tapping the ash from his pipe. His gaze was distant. Just as the fox is. Do not equate the two, Danzo snapped, a rare flicker of emotion in his voice. The Kyuubi is a beast of pure chakra, a known entity. We understand its power, its rage. It can be contained, suppressed, even weaponized with the proper training. But this, he gestured vaguely toward where the crystal ball Saturday, this is chaos. It follows no laws. It is the power of a madman, a jester. It makes a mockery of the shinobi arts, of the very principles of chakra control we have built our world upon. Hiruzen took a long drag from his pipe. He is not a madman, Danzo. He is a boy. A lonely boy who uses a power he doesn't understand to protect himself from a world that despises him. And that is precisely the problem. Danzo took a step closer to the desk, his good eye boring into Hiruzen. Emotion fuels it. What happens when that loneliness turns to rage? What happens when his childish glee becomes manic destruction? The reports say he laughs while he does it. He finds joy in this absurdity. A god who laughs is more terrifying than one who rages. You cannot reason with it. A god? Hiruzen raised a skeptical eyebrow. What else would you call it? He bends reality to his will with a giggle and a stomp. If that power is allowed to grow unchecked, untamed, he will not be a weapon. He will be an extinction event contained in the body of a Jinchuriki. A paradox of unimaginable destructive potential. Danzo's voice lowered, becoming conspiratorial, persuasive. Give him to me, Hiruzen. Let my root operatives train him. We will strip away the emotion, the laughter, the chaos. We will break him down and forge him into what he must be, a perfect, silent tool for the protection of Konoha. We will give his power purpose. Hiruzen's eyes hardened. He remembered the promise he'd made to Minato and Kushina, a promise he felt he had broken 1,000 times over. He had allowed the village to fester with hatred, had left Naruto to grow up in a cold, lonely world. But he would not hand him over to be broken. No, Danzo, he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. The boy needs connection, not isolation. He needs a teacher, not a handler. He will enroll in the academy next year with the other children. He will have teammates. A sensei. He will learn to be a shinobi of the leaf, not a weapon of the dark. Danzo's expression was unreadable, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. You are a sentimental old fool. You see the fourth sun. I see a time bomb with 2 separate fuses. When it detonates, your sentiment will be buried in the rubble with the rest of us. Without another word, Danzo turned and melted back into the shadows, leaving Hiruzen alone with the scent of his pipe and the heavy weight of his decision. He looked out the window at his village, a bustling monument to peace bought with blood. He prayed he was right. He prayed that light, not darkness, would be enough to tame the impossible boy. Naruto's apartment was 2 small rooms of profound loneliness. A bed that was rarely made, a small table with a single chair, and a counter littered with the empty, colorful cups of instant ramen. It was a place to exist, not to live. He stood in the middle of the main room, the single apple and carton of milk from his grocery trip sitting on the table like strange ornaments. He was trying to do it again. He stomped his foot. Thud. The floorboards rattled, but remained stubbornly solid. He frowned, concentrating. He pictured the alley, the feeling of the ground turning to springs beneath him. He focused on the beat, trying to summon it. Doo-doo thump. Doo-doo thump. It was there, but it was quiet, sleepy. He jumped up and down. Thump, thump, thump. Nothing. Just the annoyed banging of his downstairs neighbor on the ceiling. He sighed, flopping onto his bed. It didn't work when he tried. It only ever worked when he needed it to. Or when he was really, truly happy, like that time he'd managed to bounce a rock across the river 67 times. The rock had skipped with such force it had ended up knocking a fish out of the water, which he'd promptly cooked for dinner. That was a good day. The wind howled outside, rattling his windowpane. A storm was rolling in, the sky turning a bruised purple-gray. Rain began to lash against the glass, first as a light patter, then as a torrential downpour. Thunder rumbled in the distance, shaking the building. Naruto loved storms. The raw, untamed energy of them. It felt familiar. He went to the window, pressing his nose against the cool glass, watching the lightning spiderweb across the sky. The village lights flickered, casting long, dancing shadows. Then he saw it. Out past the village wall, near the training grounds bordering the forest of death, the sky did something impossible. It wasn't lightning. It was a tear. A jagged, vertical rip in the fabric of the night itself, bleeding colors that had no name. It was a silent scream of violet, magenta, and sickening green, a wound in reality. Naruto's breath hitched. The quiet hum in his chest flared into life, a sudden, urgent alarm. Thump 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 thump. It wasn't a playful beat. It was a warning. A call. Something was wrong. Deeply, fundamentally wrong. But also, familiar. Like a song he'd forgotten the words to. He didn't think. He acted. He threw on his jacket, yanked open his door, and was gone, a flash of orange disappearing into the rain-swept night. He ran, his small legs pumping, leaping across rooftops with an agility that defied his age. The storm raged around him, but he barely felt it. All his senses were focused on that screaming tear in the sky. As he drew closer, he saw something fall from it. A small, dark shape, tumbling end over end, plummeting toward the earth. The rift snapped shut a moment later, the unnatural colors vanishing with a sickening lurch, leaving only the storm-darkened sky behind. Naruto's heart hammered against his ribs. He pushed himself faster, his sandals slapping against the wet tiles. He vaulted the village wall, landing in the muddy grass of the training grounds. He followed the trajectory of the fall, his eyes scanning the tree-line. He found her at the edge of the forest. A girl, maybe his age, lying crumpled in the mud. She was wearing a strange, futuristic-looking white dress, now soiled and torn. One side of her hair was bright red, the other a stark white, braided together in a way he'd never seen. Bizarre, wing-like headphones were clamped over her ears, though one side had snapped off in the fall. A single feather, half red, half white, lay in the mud beside her cheek. She was unconscious, her breathing shallow. As Naruto cautiously approached, he could feel it. A power radiating from her, a low, thrumming hum that felt like music and grief mixed together. It was a discordant melody that grated against the joyful rhythm in his own soul, yet he felt an undeniable pull toward it. It was like his power was a sun, and hers was a black hole, an absence of light that was just as powerful. He knelt beside her. Her face was pale, tear-streaked even in her unconsciousness. He felt a pang of something he rarely felt for anyone else, empathy. She looked as lost and alone as he felt most days. He didn't know who she was, or where she had come from. He didn't know about different worlds, or dimensions, or cosmic singers. All he knew was that she was hurt, and alone, and had fallen out of a hole in the sky. And in Naruto Uzumaki's simple, straightforward world, that meant she needed help. He gently brushed the wet hair from her face. "You feel, loud," he whispered to the sleeping girl, though he didn't understand what he meant. With a grunt of effort, he carefully scooped her up. She was light, almost frail in his arms. He adjusted her weight, cradling her against his chest, and began the trek back to his apartment, his small frame a beacon of defiant orange against the raging storm. He had a feeling his life had just gotten a lot more complicated. And a lot less lonely. Miles away, on a windswept plateau overlooking the land of fire, a figure stood motionless in the rain. Clad in a seamless, sterile white cloak that repelled the water, they showed no signs of being affected by the storm. Their face was hidden by a helmet that was less armor and more a smooth, featureless sensor array. On their wrist, a device flickered. It was not a screen, but a three-dimensional projection of swirling, complex data. A moment ago, it had been dormant, monitoring the background ontological noise of this reality. Then, it had screamed a silent, frantic alert. The figure, a scout of the Silent Wardens, analyzed the readings. Their professional calm was a fortress, but inside, a metaphorical siren was blaring. Report, a synthesized voice commanded from within their helmet, a direct link to their superior. The scout's own voice, when they spoke, was filtered, devoid of inflection. Anomaly detected. A dimensional schism, Class 4, self-sealing. Duration, 7.4 seconds. Location, Sector 34 Gamma, designated Kanahagakur. There was a pause. Energy signature. The scout manipulated the projection, isolating the relevant data streams. The numbers were staggering. Two distinct, World-Ender-class signatures have converged at the site of the schism. The silence that followed was heavy with meaning. A single manifestation was a generational crisis. 2, in the same place, at the same time, it was unprecedented. It was a herald of cosmic catastrophe. Detail the signatures, the commander ordered, their synthesized voice sharp with urgency. Signature Alpha matches the profile. Fluctuating, chaotic, reality-warping properties consistent with. Nika, the scout said, the designation leaving a foul taste even in their filtered speech. The sun god has manifested. Power levels are nascent but growing exponentially. Signature Beta is, unknown. It is not on file. It registers as a mimetic, consciousness-based entity. A song that bends reality. Immense potential for global-scale psychological dominance. The commander processed this. The return of their ancient enemy was bad enough. The arrival of a second, unknown god-tier entity alongside it was a nightmare scenario. The convergence protocol is authorized, the commander's voice returned, laced with grim finality. Your new directive is to observe and identify both targets. Do not engage. The Chronic Keeper has been alerted. He will formulate the response strategy himself. Understood, the scout replied. Their featureless helmet turned back toward the distant, storm-shrouded village. The hunt had begun. The infection had been found. And the cure would be absolute. The first thing Yuta registered was the smell. It was savory, salty, and completely alien. It wasn't the sea breeze scent of Elegia or the metallic tang of Shank's ship. It was, noodles. Her eyes fluttered open. The world was blurry, dim. She was lying on a soft surface, a coarse blanket pulled up to her chin. She was in a small, sparsely decorated room. A single, bare bulb hung from the ceiling, casting a yellow glow. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her. Where was she? What happened? Memories flooded back in a chaotic torrent, the concert, the cheering crowds, the Yuta Yuta world, the creeping dread of the mushrooms, Tot Musica, the monster. The roar of the beast made of sheet music and rage. The desperate fight. The choice she'd made. She was supposed to be, gone. She sat up with a gasp, her head throbbing. Her dress was still damp. Her headphones, she reached up, her fingers finding the broken plastic on one side. A sob caught in her throat. Hey, you're awake. The voice made her jump. She scrambled back on the bed, pressing herself against the wall. A boy was sitting at a small table, watching her. He had spiky blonde hair, bright blue eyes, and strange whisker-like marks on his cheeks. He was holding a steaming cup in his hands. Who are you? She whispered, her voice raspy. Where am I? I'm Naruto Uzumaki. And you're in my apartment, he said simply. He didn't move closer, sensing her fear. You, kinda fell out of the sky. I saw you from my window. Fell out of the sky. The tear. The screaming colors. It wasn't a dream. She was somewhere else. Somewhere completely, terrifyingly new. Tears welled in her eyes, hot and immediate. She was alone. Truly, utterly alone. Shanks couldn't find her here. The Red Hair Pirates were a universe away. Are you hungry? Naruto asked, interrupting her spiral of despair. He held up the cup. I made you some ramen. It's the pork flavor. It's the best. She stared at him, then at the cup. Her stomach growled, a traitorous sound in the tense silence. She hadn't eaten in, she couldn't remember. The fear and the hunger warred within her. He seemed to take her silence as a maybe. He stood up slowly, and placed the cup on the floor, a few feet from the bed. Then he retreated back to his table, giving her space. It was such a small gesture of consideration, but it cut through a sliver of her panic. He wasn't threatening her. He was just a kid. A strange kid, but a kid nonetheless. Hesitantly, she slid off the bed. Her legs were shaky. She picked up the cup. It was warm in her cold hands. She took a tentative sip of the broth. It was salty, rich, and intensely flavorful. It was the most real thing she had experienced since waking up. She sat on the floor and began to eat, the simple act of filling her stomach a temporary anchor in a sea of confusion. Naruto watched her, a curious, gentle look on his face. So, falling out of the sky. Do you do that often? She looked up, broth dripping from her chin. The question was so absurd, so genuinely curious, that she didn't know how to respond. She just shook her head, her mismatched hair swaying. My name is Yuta, she managed to say, her voice barely a whisper. Yuta, Naruto repeated, testing the name on his tongue. He grinned, a bright, friendly thing. That's a nice name. It's good to meet you, Yuta. She finished the ramen in silence. The warmth spread through her, chasing away some of the chill, but the fear remained, a cold knot in her stomach. Exhaustion washed over her, heavy and absolute. She curled up on the bed again, pulling the blanket tight around her. Naruto just sat at his table, watching over her, a silent, unlikely guardian. She closed her eyes, and despite everything, sleep claimed her. But sleep was not a sanctuary. It was a gateway back to the horror. She was on the stage again. The world was purple, twisted. Taut musica towered over her, its maw open, a symphony of destruction in its throat. The faces in the crowd were contorted in terror, their screams silent. Your song will bring eternal suffering. You are a monster. The voices echoed in her mind, the voices of her own fans, the voices of her own fear. Monster. 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 The bed began to shake. In the waking world, Naruto shot to his feet. A low, discordant hum filled the room, a sound that made his teeth ache. The air grew heavy, oppressive. The ramen cup on the table rattled, then slowly lifted into the air, hovering. Yuta was thrashing in her sleep, whimpering, her face pale with sweat. Yuta. Naruto said, taking a step closer. The single light bulb flickered violently. The walls of the apartment seemed to warp and bend, the straight lines of the doorframe bowing inward as if under immense pressure. The floorboards groaned. Her unconscious power was lashing out, fueled by her nightmare, turning Naruto's small apartment into a pocket of madness. Naruto felt the oppressive energy trying to crush him, trying to drag him into her despair. The joyful beat in his chest faltered, smothered by the suffocating melody of her pain. He had to stop it. He had to wake her up. He reached out to shake her, but an invisible force pushed his hand back. He was scared. The feeling was raw and real. But beneath the fear, the drumbeat in his soul began to pound again, a defiant rhythm against the song of sorrow. Do thump. Do thump. It wasn't about fighting. It was about an idea, a desperate, insane, brilliant idea. He couldn't overpower her sadness. But maybe he could make it laugh. He took a deep breath, and let the power flow. Yuta's eyes snapped open. The nightmare was gone, but the room was still wrong, the air thick with her own terrifying power. She saw Naruto standing by her bed, and she opened her mouth to scream, to warn him away. But the scream died in her throat. Naruto's face, it was impossible. His eyes had literally popped out of their sockets, dangling by their optic nerves like a pair of cartoon goggles. They bobbed up and down, looking at her with an expression of comical alarm. His jaw was unhinged, his tongue rolling out like a long, red carpet, a perfect spiral at its tip. His entire head seemed to have inflated to twice its normal size, his whisker marks stretching into fat, curved lines. It was the most ridiculous, ludicrous, reality-breaking thing she had ever seen. The sheer, unadulterated absurdity of it was a physical shock. It was so completely at odds with the terror of her nightmare, so utterly nonsensical, that it shattered her concentration like a pane of glass. The room snapped back to normal. The heavy pressure vanished. The floating ramen cup clattered to the floor. The walls were straight again. The only sound was the rain outside and their own breathing. Yuta stared, her mind blank, her heart still pounding. Naruto held the impossible pose for another second, his cartoon eyes blinking at her. Then, with a soft pop and a wet, slurping sound, everything snapped back into place. His eyes were back in his head. His jaw was normal. His tongue was gone. He was just a boy again, albeit one with a very strained grin on his face. He let out a shaky breath. "Better?" he asked, his voice a little hoarse. Yuta could only stare. The boy who had offered her ramen, the boy with the kind eyes, was not just a boy. He was something else. Something impossible. Something that could literally pop his eyes out of his head. Her fear of this new world was suddenly overshadowed by a profound, overwhelming sense of wonder and confusion. For the first time since she had woken up in the mud, she wasn't thinking about her past. She was completely, utterly transfixed by the impossible boy in front of her. Chapter 2, A Song for the Sun. The morning light that filtered through Naruto's window was a gentle, forgiving gold. It painted a stripe across the floor, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Yuta was curled on the bed, still wrapped in the coarse blanket, her breathing even. She looked smaller in the daylight, more fragile. The vibrant red and white of her hair was a splash of impossible color in the drabness of the room. Naruto sat at his table, watching her. He hadn't slept. Every time he'd closed his eyes, he'd seen the image of his own face, cartoonishly distorted, reflected in her wide, terrified ones. He'd replayed the moment his eyes popped out, the squelching sound they'd made when they snapped back into place. It wasn't scary to him. It was just, what happened sometimes. But seeing her reaction, that mix of shock and utter disbelief, made him look at it through a different lens. For her, it was like a law of nature had been casually broken in his living room. A low growl from his stomach broke the silence. He was out of instant ramen. A true crisis. He stood, wincing as his joints protested the night spent in a wooden chair. He needed to make breakfast, for both of them. He rummaged through his meager pantry, more instant ramen cups, crisis averted, a dusty bag of rice, and a half-empty box of cereal on a high shelf he couldn't normally reach without a chair. He looked at the cereal box, then at the sleeping girl. He didn't want to make a racket dragging the chair across the floor. An idea, simple and instinctive, popped into his head. He focused on his arm, on the feeling of looseness, of boundless potential. He reached up toward the shelf. His arm stretched. And stretched. And stretched. His shoulder stayed in place, but his hand, wrist, and forearm elongated smoothly, silently, like a telescope extending. His fingers wrapped around the cereal box. He retracted his arm, the limb shrinking back to its normal size with a faint, rubbery hum. He placed the box on the counter, a small smile on his face. Easy. He poured the cereal into 2 bowls, added the last of the milk he bought yesterday, and placed them on the table. The soft clinking of the ceramic woke her. Yuta's eyes opened, darting around the room in a moment of panic before they landed on him. The fear receded, replaced by a wary caution. "Good morning," Naruto said, his voice bright. found some cereal. It's not ramen, but it's food. She sat up, clutching the blanket like a shield. Her eyes flickered to his face, as if searching for any sign of it wanting to contort again. Seeing nothing but a friendly kid, she slowly swung her legs over the side of the bed. She was still wearing the tattered white dress. It looked even more out of place in the morning light. She walked to the table and sat down, her movements stiff. She picked up the spoon but didn't eat, just stared into the bowl. So, Naruto began, trying to fill the silence. Your world, does everyone have two different hair colors? Yuta looked up, surprised by the question. No, she said, her voice quiet. Just me. She touched her hair self-consciously. My father, he has red hair. She didn't mention her mother. Oh. Cool. Naruto took a crunchy bite of cereal. So, what's it like? Your world. Are there villages? Shinobi. She looked confused. Shinobi. You know, ninjas, he clarified. People who can walk on water, and breathe fire, and do cool stuff with hand signs. Yuta shook her head slowly. No. We have pirates. Marines. And a world government. The word sounded heavy, laden with history he couldn't comprehend. We travel on ships, across vast oceans with thousands of islands. Not, continents like this. She gestured vaguely. Everything here feels so, still. The ground doesn't move. Naruto thought about what it must be like to live on a ship, the deck always rocking beneath your feet. Sounds fun, he decided. She gave him a strange look, a mix of sadness and disbelief. It's not always fun. Her gaze became distant, shadowed by memories. It can be very dangerous. And very lonely. The word lonely hung in the air between them. It was a language they both understood perfectly. Naruto stopped eating. He knew that look. He saw it in the mirror every day. Yeah, he said softly. I get that. They ate in a comfortable silence after that. When they were done, Naruto took the bowls. As he turned to the sink, Yuta spoke again, her voice barely a whisper. Last night, your face, Naruto froze, his back to her. He braced himself for the fear, the disgust. How did you do that? She asked. There was no revulsion in her voice. Only a deep, genuine curiosity. He turned around, surprised. I don't know, he admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. It just happens sometimes. When I need it to. My body gets all weird. Stretchy. Bouncy. He paused, then decided to just be honest. Most people think it's creepy. They call me a demon. Yuta's expression softened with a flicker of recognition. The people in my world, they called me a monster. Their eyes met. In that moment, they weren't a Jinchuriki and a dimension-hopping songstress. They were just two kids who had been given terrifying, wonderful powers and been hated for them. A fragile, unspoken alliance was forged in the quiet of Naruto's kitchen. You need new clothes, Naruto declared, abruptly changing the subject. You can't walk around in that. People are already gonna stare. He rummaged through his closet, which was a monolithic sea of orange. He pulled out an old, faded orange shirt and a pair of black shorts. They might be a little big, but it's better than a torn dress. She accepted the clothes without a word and disappeared into the bathroom. When she emerged a few minutes later, she looked like a different person. The baggy orange shirt swallowed her small frame, but it made her look less like a fallen angel and more like a normal kid. A very, very pale kid with extraordinary hair. Okay, Naruto said, grabbing his keys. Time for operation, show Yuta the village. Rule number 1, stick close to me. Rule number 2, try not to look like you just fell out of the sky. She managed a tiny, fleeting smile. It was the first one he'd seen. It felt like a bigger victory than beating up 3 bullies in an alley. Konoha was a vibrant, living thing. The streets were thronged with people, shinobi in their standard-issue flak jackets, merchants hawking their wares, children chasing each other with wooden kunai. The air buzzed with life and energy. For Yuta, who was used to the endless blue of the ocean and the contained chaos of a pirate ship, it was overwhelming. Naruto walked with a confidence that seemed at odds with his surroundings. He navigated the crowds with an easy familiarity, pointing things out to her. "That's the academy," he said, gesturing to a large, imposing building. "Where they train you to be a ninja. I'm starting there next year." "That's the Hokage monument," he explained, pointing up at the massive cliff face where 4 stern faces were carved into the rock. They were the strongest leaders of the village. The 4th one saved us from a giant monster fox, like, 10 years ago. He was the coolest. He didn't know, of course, that he was talking about his own father, or that the monster was sleeping inside his own gut. As they walked, Yuta noticed it. The whispers. The way people would smile at each other one moment, then their faces would shudder and turn cold when they saw Naruto. Mothers would pull their children a little closer. Merchants who had been calling out cheerfully would suddenly fall silent as they passed. It was a subtle, pervasive chill that followed them like a shadow. Naruto, for his part, seemed completely oblivious. He just kept walking, his head held high, a defiant grin on his face. But Yuta saw the truth. He wasn't oblivious, he was practiced. His cheerfulness was a shield, a bright orange armor against the 1,000 tiny cuts of their scorn. "Why do they look at you like that?" she asked quietly, when they paused by a dango shop. Naruto's smile didn't falter. "Oh, that? They're just jealous of my awesome future Hokage vibe." He said it with a laugh, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Don't worry about it." He bought them each a stick of dango, paying the vendor who took his money without making eye contact. They found a bench overlooking a small, peaceful river that ran through the village. Yuta nibbled on the sweet, sticky rice ball. It was delicious. Everything here was so different, but the kindness of this strange, lonely boy was a small, warm anchor. "I want to show you something," Naruto said suddenly, finishing his dango in 2 bites. "The real me. The part that isn't just, here." He gestured to the village around them. "Come on." He led her away from the bustling center of the village, toward the quiet outskirts where the training grounds were. They passed numbered wooden posts, riddled with kunai holes and scorch marks. They were utterly alone. The only sound was the wind rustling through the leaves of the great, ancient trees. "Okay," Naruto said, turning to her with a look of pure, unadulterated excitement in his eyes. "Watch this." He wasn't trying to impress her, she realized. He was trying to share something with her. The secret he'd kept hidden behind his grin. He took a running start toward a massive, thick log used for strength training. "Gomu Gomu no," he yelled the strange words, though he didn't know where they came from. They just felt right. "Pistol." His arm shot forward, stretching an impossible 20 feet, and his fist slammed into the log. But instead of the sharp crack of wood, there was a deep, resonant boom, as if a giant drum had been struck. The log didn't splinter, it shuddered violently and was launched backward, tumbling end over end until it crashed into the trees 100 yards away. Yuta's jaw dropped. Naruto stood there, his arms snapping back into place, breathing a little heavily. A wide, joyful grin split his face. The beat in his chest, the one she could now faintly sense as a strange vibration in the air, was thrumming with life. Doo-doo thump. Doo-doo thump. He didn't stop there. He leaped into the air, his body impossibly lithe. He grabbed a high branch, but his arms stretched again, turning him into a human slingshot. He launched himself across the clearing, ricocheting off a tree trunk, which momentarily turned rubbery on impact, and landed perfectly on top of a training post, balancing on one foot. "See?" he called down to her, laughing. The sound was infectious, full of a freedom so pure it was almost dizzying. This is me. This is what I can do. He wasn't a demon. He wasn't a monster. He was joy. A chaotic, untamed, physical manifestation of joy. Yuta stared, mesmerized. In her world, power was about conquest, about rules, about strength. It was devil fruits and hockey and willpower. It was serious business. But this was play. This was the power of a child's imagination brought to life. Slowly, hesitantly, she began to hum. It was a simple, nameless melody, one that just came to her in the moment. It was soft, inquisitive, full of the wonder she was feeling. The effect on Naruto was instantaneous. He flinched on top of the post, his head snapping toward her. The joyful rhythm in his chest, the drums of liberation, suddenly swelled, harmonizing with her tune. Do-do thump. Do-do thump. It felt like his entire being was resonating with her melody. The air around him shimmered. He felt stronger, lighter, more vibrant. The very colors of the world seemed to get brighter. Whoa, he breathed, his eyes wide. What was that? Do that again. She looked at him, then at her own hands. Her power. It had always been for an audience, for control, for creating her world. She had never just shared it with one person. She had never felt it connect with something else. Taking a shallow breath, she let the hum grow, weaving a simple song with no words. A song about a boy who could stretch and bounce, a song about the sun breaking through the clouds. Naruto felt a surge of energy. He pushed off the post, his body inflating slightly like a balloon, and he floated gently to the ground, landing with a soft poof. He felt incredible. Your voice, he said, his voice full of awe. It's like fuel. It makes the beat in my chest louder. The trust in his eyes was a key, unlocking a door deep inside her she thought had been sealed forever. She had to show him. She had to make him understand who she was, what she'd done. The joyful tune faded, replaced by something else. A new melody, fragile and heartbreaking, began to spill from her lips. This time, there were words. Soft, pained whispers of a promise, of a new Genesis that had turned into a nightmare. A song of a loving father forced to abandon his child, of a girl left alone on an island of ghosts, of a desperate dream to create a perfect world that had birthed a monster. She sang of top musica. She didn't see it, but high in a tree on the edge of the clearing, a figure froze. Kakashi Hatake, assigned by the Hokage to discreetly observe the strange new arrival, had been watching with a detached curiosity. But as Yuta's song reached him, the world dissolved. He was no longer in a sun-dappled training ground. He was in a cave, the air thick with the smell of blood and damp stone. A girl with brown hair lay on the ground, a gaping hole in her chest. A boy with Sharingan eyes, half his body crushed, looked on in horror. Rin. Obito. The Chidori crackled on his hand, the hand that had just. The grief, the failure, the soul-crushing weight of it all slammed into him, as fresh and raw as it had been that day. He was trapped, drowning in his worst memory, the song a cage built from his own regrets. He gasped for air, his hand flying to his chest, the sound of 1,000 chirping birds screaming in his mind. Back in the clearing, the song ended. Yuta was crying silently, tears tracking paths through the grime on her cheeks. Naruto just stood there, his own playful energy gone, replaced by a profound stillness. He hadn't been trapped in a memory, but he had felt every ounce of the sorrow in her voice. He felt her loneliness, her guilt, her terror. He didn't say anything. He just walked forward and wrapped his arms around her in a hug. It was clumsy and awkward, but it was warm. Yuta stiffened for a moment, then collapsed against him, her body shaking with silent sobs. It's okay, Naruto whispered into her hair, holding her tightly. You're not a monster, Yuta. You're just sad. In the Hokage's office, the crystal ball showed a frantic ANBU medic reviving a hyperventilating and disoriented Kakashi. Hiruzen Sarutobi's face was grim. A mimetic auditory power capable of inducing hallucinatory trauma states, he murmured, his knuckles white around his pipe. By the gods, Danzo, who had been observing from the corner, stepped forward. A thin, cruel smile touched his lips. A perfect weapon, he said. And a perfect liability. They are too dangerous to be left to their own devices, Hiruzen. They need to be tested. Pushed. We need to see the limits of this. Duet. The mission was, on its surface, simple. A C rank, bordering on D. A team of genin in training were to escort a courier carrying a sealed scroll to a checkpoint in the forests north of Konoha. It was a milk run, designed to foster teamwork. Hiruzen had assembled a proto-team 7 for the task, Naruto Uzumaki, for his unpredictable power, Sasuke Uchiha, for his top-of-the-class precision and lineage, and Sakura Haruno, for her intelligence and chakra control. Yuta was to accompany them, officially as a non-combatant ward of the Hokage under Naruto's protection. Unofficially, she was the other half of Danzo's experiment. Sasuke Uchiha was not pleased. He stood with his arms crossed, his dark eyes radiating an aura of aristocratic disdain. He had watched Naruto's pathetic display in the academy's spars, uncontrolled, undisciplined flailing that somehow resulted in victory. He had heard the rumors of Naruto's demonic nature. To be partnered with him was an insult. And the strange, quiet girl with the mismatched hair was just another variable he didn't care for. "Let's get this over with," Sasuke said, his voice clipped and cold. He glanced at Naruto. "Try not to trip over your own feet, dope." "Don't worry about me, team," Naruto shot back with a grin, the old insult feeling comfortable, familiar. "I'm the one who's going to make this mission exciting." Sakura sighed, caught between the brooding prodigy she idolized and the loudmouthed deadlast. "Can you two just try to get along for one day?" she pleaded. Yuta stayed close to Naruto, her eyes downcast, the energy of the two squabbling boys a sharp contrast to her own withdrawn silence. They set off, moving through the trees at a steady, ground-level pace for the benefit of the civilian courier. Sasuke moved with a silent, predatory grace. Naruto, by contrast, seemed to bounce with every step, a low, happy rhythm humming from him. An hour into the journey, it happened. They were in a dense part of the forest, the canopy so thick it cast the ground in perpetual twilight. 6 figures dropped from the trees, silent as ghosts. They wore blank, white masks and simple gray bodysuits. No flak jackets, no headbands. "Root!" The courier screamed and fainted. "Ambush!" Sakura yelled, fumbling for a kunai. Sasuke was already moving. "Fire style, fireball jutsu." He inhaled, his chest puffing out, and unleashed a massive orb of flame that roared through the trees, forcing 2 of the masked ninja to scatter. It was a perfect, textbook execution. Naruto, however, just grinned. The drumbeat in his chest kicked into high gear. Finally, some action. A root operative lunged at him, a short sword held in a reverse grip. Naruto didn't dodge. He waited until the last second, then stomped his foot. Boing! The ground beneath the operative turned to springy rubber. The man's disciplined charge became an awkward stumble, and Naruto, using the rebound, launched himself over the man's head. While airborne, he saw another operative throwing a volley of shuriken at Yuta. "Oh, no you don't," he yelled. His neck stretched, his head shooting forward like a fleshy projectile. He opened his mouth wide and caught all 6 shuriken with a series of metallic clink-clink-clink sounds. He hung there for a moment, his head connected to his distant shoulders by a long, serpentine neck, his cheeks puffed out. Everyone, Sasuke, Sakura, and the root ninja, froze, staring at the sheer biological insanity of the display. Naruto muffled something that sounded like, "Gomu Gomu no Seed Machine Gun." He then spat the shuriken back out with the force of a Gatling gun, the metal stars a blur of motion. The root operative barely managed to block them, his arm guard sparking from the impacts. Sasuke watched, his face a mask of cold fury. This wasn't combat. This was a circus act. A mockery. While he was using refined, powerful jutsu passed down through his noble clan, Naruto was spitting ninja tools like a sideshow freak. It was blasphemy. This is pathetic, Sasuke muttered, engaging another operative with a series of precise, deadly taijutsu strikes. Naruto, his head snapping back to his shoulders, was having the time of his life. He bounced around the battlefield, his limbs stretching and contorting. He dodged a sword strike by having his torso bend at a 90-degree angle, his upper body parallel to the ground. He defeated one operative by inflating his fist to the size of a boulder and bringing it down in a slow, ponderous, yet unstoppable arc. The operative was flattened into the soft earth, a perfect cartoon outline of his body left in the dirt. But the root ninja were relentless. They were emotionless, disciplined, and they adapted. One of them, the leader, noticed Yuta. He saw the way Naruto's attention was divided, the way he kept glancing back at her. He was the weak point. Ignoring Naruto, the leader blurred past him in a burst of speed, his target locked. Naruto was tied up with two others, his arms stretched and tangled around a tree as he tried to pin them. He couldn't react in time. "Yuta," he screamed. Yuta looked up to see the masked man bearing down on her, a strange, glowing seal tag in his hand. Her blood ran cold. She was helpless. A liability. Just like on Elegia. She was going to be the reason he got hurt. No. The thought was a defiant scream in her mind. Not again. She wouldn't be the damsel. She wouldn't be the weak point. She would be the strength he needed. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and sang. It wasn't a song of sorrow or of dreams. It was a battle hymn. A powerful, soaring anthem of courage and defiance. It was a song of a rising sun, of unbreakable will, of a warrior whose heart beat to the rhythm of a drum. The melody shot through the clearing, a tangible force of sound and emotion. For the root ninja, it was like wading through molasses. A sudden, inexplicable wave of doubt and weariness washed over them. Their movements became sluggish, their killing intent dulled. The leader, who was inches from Yuta, stumbled as if hit by a physical blow. For Naruto, it was like a lightning strike. The song poured into him, and his inner drumbeat exploded into a thunderous, earth-shaking roar. Doom dada doom dada doom. The playful energy coalesced into overwhelming power. He felt invincible. YH, he roared, a sound of pure elation. The tree he was tangled in suddenly turned to rubber. With a single flex of his muscles, he snapped his arms free, the rubberized wood groaning. He looked at the two operatives before him, his grin wider and more manic than ever. Gomu Gomu no Bazooka. He stretched both arms far back, then slammed them forward. His open palm struck the two root ninja in their chests. The impact wasn't a sharp crack, but a deep, concussive thwomp that sent them flying backward like cannonballs, crashing through the forest until they were out of sight. The rest was a blur. Naruto became a whirlwind of orange, a joyful, unstoppable force of nature. He defeated the remaining operatives in seconds, not with brutality, but with an overwhelming, almost comical display of power, all set to the soundtrack of Yuta's soaring anthem. When the last root ninja was unconscious, the song faded. The clearing was silent, save for the sound of heavy breathing. Sakura and the fainted courier were unharmed. Naruto stood in the center of the mess, vibrating with excess energy, his chest still thrumming with the echo of the song. He turned to Yuta, his face alight with the biggest, most genuine grin she had ever seen. "We did it," he cheered. "You and me. We're an awesome team." Yuta felt a warmth spread through her chest, a feeling so foreign and so welcome it brought tears to her eyes. She had helped. Her song had been a weapon of protection, not control. The moment was shattered by a cold, cutting voice. That was disgusting. They both turned. Sasuke stood there, his Sharingan blazing, not with the thrill of battle, but with a deep, chilling revulsion. He wasn't looking at the defeated enemies. He was looking at Naruto. You bounce around like a child's toy. You make a mockery of everything a shinobi is supposed to be. Discipline. Control. Precision. He spat the words out like poison. You have this, freakish power, and you treat it like a game. Naruto's grin faltered. Hey, we won, didn't we? Everyone's safe. Winning like that is meaningless, Sasuke shot back, deactivating his Sharingan. His black eyes were hard as obsidian. It's hollow. There's no art to it. No pride. It's just noise. He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a low, venomous hiss. I don't know what you are, with your stretching limbs and that beat you give off. But it's not a shinobi. He looked Naruto up and down, his gaze filled with a judgment that was colder than any villager's glare. It's a disease. The word struck Naruto with the force of a physical blow. The joyful rhythm in his chest sputtered and died, leaving a hollow silence. The vibrant energy drained out of him, leaving him feeling small and exhausted. He'd heard demon and monster his whole life. But disease, that was different. It made him sound like something that needed to be cured. Eradicated. Sasuke turned his back on them and walked over to where Sakura was tending to the courier. The mission is complete. Let's go. Naruto just stood there, his bright orange jacket suddenly looking garish and loud in the quiet forest. For the first time, his own power felt alien to him. Wrong. The shield of his cheerfulness was gone, and the deep, profound loneliness he tried so hard to hide was laid bare for the world to see. He felt a small, warm hand slide into his. He looked down. Yuta was standing beside him, her gaze fixed on Sasuke's retreating back. She didn't say anything. She just squeezed his hand, a simple, silent declaration. He's wrong. I'm with you. Naruto looked at their joined hands, then back at her. Her eyes, one brown, one violet, were filled with a fierce, protective loyalty. The hollow space in his chest didn't disappear, but it felt a little less empty. He squeezed her hand back. Chapter 3, The Warden's Gambit. The whispers began in the border towns, carried on the tongues of traveling merchants and whispered over cups of tea in quiet inns. They were insidious, crafted with a watchmaker's precision to sound like genuine, eyewitness terror. It started in the land of tea, with a portly silk merchant who swore he'd seen it in a dream, a vision so real it had left him shaking for days. A boy, no, a god, he'd stammered to a rapt audience in a tavern, his hands trembling as he clutched his cup. White hair, white clothes, and a smile that stretched from ear to ear. He was laughing, a sound like booming drums. But there was nothing funny about it. He bounced on the rooftops of a city I didn't recognize, and every time his feet touched down, the buildings turned to jelly and collapsed. He was liberating them. He called it. But it was destruction. Joyful, gleeful destruction. The story spread. It changed in the telling, as such stories do. In the land of rivers, it was a laughing god who turned a great fleet of ships into rubber, causing them to capsize and sink, all while he danced on the water's surface. In a remote farming village in the land of fire itself, an old woman collapsed in the market, screaming about a vision sent by the spirits. She spoke of a white-haired sun demon whose laughter withered the crops and whose touch brought a chaotic, nonsensical plague. These were not random rumors. They were surgical strikes of information, each one amplified by a subtle, technological genjutsu deployed by unseen agents. The warden scout, the one who called himself Kashin, moved from town to town, a ghost in the machine. He carried a small, multifaceted crystal that, when activated, would resonate with the latent fear in a crowd, projecting a sliver of an image, a whisper of a drumbeat, directly into their subconscious. He didn't need to convince them. He only needed to plant the seed. Fear would do the rest. The propaganda was terrifyingly effective because it preyed on a fundamental truth: the unknown is fearsome. And nothing was more unknown than the impossible boy in Konoha. The rumors, now embellished with the weight of dozens of eyewitness accounts, finally reached the ears of the Fire Daimyo. A scroll, stamped with the daimyo's imperial seal, arrived in Konoha on the wings of his fastest hawk. It did not request a meeting. It issued a command. The air in the Hokage's office was thick enough to choke on. Hiruzen Sarutobi sat behind his desk, the open scroll before him feeling heavier than a mountain. His old advisors, Hamura and Kahaku, stood to his left, their faces etched with deep concern. Danzo stood to his right, his one visible eye gleaming with a cold, triumphant light. "It is as I predicted," Danzo said, his voice a low, chilling monotone that cut through the silence. "Your sentimentality has endangered us all. The daimyo has heard tales of a laughing demon in Konoha whose chaotic power threatens the stability of the entire nation. He is framing this as a failure of your leadership, Hiruzen. He demands that the anomaly be surrendered to his personal guard for containment and study. Surrender a shinobi of the leaf to the daimyo's samurai?" Hamura scoffed, his voice tight with indignation. "That is an insult to our sovereignty. The daimyo has no authority over our military forces. He has the authority to cut off our funding," Hamura, Kahaku countered, her voice frail but sharp. "He can brand Konoha a rogue state, a harbor for monsters. Public opinion is turning. These stories, these visions, they are spreading like wildfire. If we are seen to be protecting a demon child against the interests of the nation, our political standing will crumble. These are lies. Propaganda." Hiruzen slammed his hand on the desk, a rare display of fiery anger. "Naruto is a boy, not a god of destruction. He saved lives during the root ambush. He is learning. He is a laughing time bomb, and the entire world is now listening to it tick," Danzo said calmly. "The daimyo's demand is an opportunity. It gives us the political cover we need to act. We will not surrender him. That would be a sign of weakness. Instead, we will hold a formal hearing. We will bring the boy before the council, and we will demonstrate that we are taking this threat seriously. We will assess him. And we will contain him. And the girl." Hiruzen's eyes narrowed. "Contain. He cannot be allowed to roam free," Danzo pressed, his logic a cold, suffocating blanket. "And the girl, Yuta?" Kakashi's report was alarming. "A power that can incapacitate a jonin of his caliber with a song. She is just as dangerous. They are a catalyst for each other. We must separate them, study them, and neutralize the threat they pose together. It is the only logical path." The elders exchanged a look. Danzo's logic was brutal, but in the face of the daimyo's wrath, it was also persuasive. Hiruzen felt the walls closing in. He was losing control of the narrative, of the boy's fate. "A hearing, then," Hiruzen conceded, his voice heavy with defeat. "Before the full council. Naruto will have a chance to speak for himself. But he will not be treated as a prisoner, Danzo. He is a shinobi of this village." Danzo gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. For now. The village had changed. It was no longer just whispers and cold stares. The fear now had a voice. When Naruto and Yuta walked down the street, people would openly cross to the other side. The ramen stand at Ichiraku, the one place Naruto had always felt welcome, was suddenly closed for cleaning when he approached. Tucci had a pained look in his eyes, unable to meet Naruto's gaze. They stood in front of a grocery store, the owner barring the door with his body. "We're out of everything," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "Just go. Please. You're bad for business." Naruto's usual defiant grin was nowhere to be found. His face was a tight, strained mask. He had faced down kunai and swords, but this open, fearful rejection from his own people was a wound that cut deeper than any blade. "Let's just go home, Naruto," Yuta said softly, pulling on the sleeve of his jacket. She could feel the oppressive weight of the villagers' fear like a physical force. It was suffocating. They walked back to his apartment in silence, the vibrant energy of the village feeling a million miles away. Once inside, Naruto slumped into his chair, staring at the empty table. The joyful rhythm in his chest was gone, replaced by a hollow, aching void. Yuta watched him, her heart twisting in her chest. This was her fault. Not directly, but she knew this pattern. She had seen it on Elegia. The initial wonder and excitement from her fans had slowly curdled into obsession, then fear, and finally, hatred when she tried to take their freedom for their own good. The world had turned on her. Now it was turning on him. An old, dark thought, a serpent of an idea, uncoiled in the back of her mind. It was a seductive whisper, born of her power and her desperation. "You can fix this." She could sing. Not a song of courage, not a song of sorrow. A song of love. A song of absolute, unwavering adoration. She could walk out into the village square and unleash a melody so powerful, so compelling, that it would rewrite their very emotions. They would look at Naruto and feel nothing but love. They would cheer his name, celebrate his power, beg him to be their Hokage. There would be no more glares, no more whispers, no more pain. She could create a perfect world for him, here, just as she had tried to do for everyone else. All it would take was one song. One little push. The thought was so powerful, so tempting, that it made her feel sick to her stomach. The memory of Tot Musica, of the monster her good intentions had created, screamed a warning. "Yuta. You okay?" Naruto's voice was quiet, concerned. He had looked up from his stupor to see her pale, her hands clenched into tight fists. She couldn't hold it in. The darkness, the temptation, it was too much to bear alone. Tears welled in her eyes. "I could make them stop," she whispered, her voice trembling. Naruto frowned, confused. "Make who stop?" "All of them," she said, her voice cracking. She looked at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of hope and self-loathing. "I could sing a song. Right now. I could make them all love you, Naruto. I could make them forget they were ever afraid. I could make them worship you. I could build you a world with no hate in it. I could do it. I almost did it before, for everyone." She expected him to be happy, or excited. To see the beautiful possibility. Instead, a look of profound horror crossed his face. He stood up and walked over to her, his movements urgent. He knelt in front of her, taking her trembling hands in his. "Don't ever say that," he said, his voice low and intense. He wasn't angry. He was scared. Scared for her. "Don't even think it. But they're hurting you," she cried. "I can't stand it. It's just like, I know," he said, his grip on her hands tightening. "But that's not love, Yuta. That's a cage. It wouldn't be real." He looked her right in the eyes, his own blue ones shining with a raw, desperate honesty. "I don't care if the whole world hates me. I'm used to it. I can take it." He took a shaky breath, and his next word struck her with the force of a physical blow, shattering the dark temptation into a million pieces. "You don't have to make them love me," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I just need you not to hate me." The raw emotional clarity of it, the simple, profound truth, broke her. All his bravado, all his loud proclamations of becoming Hokage, it all boiled down to this. He didn't need the world. He just needed one person. A sob escaped her lips, and she threw her arms around his neck, burying her face in his shoulder. He hugged her back tightly, a silent, shared promise that as long as they had each other, the rest of the world and its hatred could wait outside the door. The council chamber was a cold, imposing amphitheater. Naruto stood alone in the center of the floor, the semicircle of stern, judgmental faces looking down on him like vultures. Hiruzen sat in the center, flanked by his advisors. Danzo was a statue in the shadows. Yuta had been made to wait outside, a decision that made Naruto's stomach churn. "Naruto Uzumaki," Hiruzen began, his voice echoing in the cavernous room. "You have been brought before this council to address the concerns of the Fire Lord and the citizens of this nation. They speak of a power you possess, a power of chaos and destruction. They call you a demon." Naruto's hands clenched at his sides. He looked up, his gaze sweeping across the old, tired faces. "What do you have to say in your defense?" Hiruzen asked. Naruto took a breath. He didn't have a grand speech. He didn't have political rhetoric. He only had the truth. "I'm not a demon," he said, his voice clear and steady, ringing with a conviction that surprised some of the council members. "I have a power. I don't know where it came from. Sometimes it's weird, and I can't always control it. But I've never used it to hurt anyone who didn't try to hurt me or my friends first." He looked directly at Hiruzen. "I use my power to help people. I saved Yuta. We stopped those masked ninja in the forest. If my power is chaotic, it's because I use it to protect people from the neat, orderly plans of bad guys." His simple, childish logic was disarming. It wasn't a defense, it was a statement of fact from his perspective. A few of the clan heads murmured amongst themselves. Danzo chose that moment to step forward. "A noble sentiment from a child who doesn't understand the weapon he wields," he said, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "His intentions may be pure, but the results are chaos. Unpredictability is a liability Konoha cannot afford. The power must be." He was cut off by a deep, resonant boom that shook the entire building to its foundations. Dust rained down from the ceiling. A frantic ANBU operative appeared at the chamber entrance, his mask askew. "Lord Hokage." An explosion at the Great Stone Reservoir. "The west wall has been breached. The lower districts are in the path of the flood." Panic erupted in the chamber. The lower districts were the most densely populated, full of civilians. The ensuing flood would cause untold destruction and loss of life. Hiruzen was already on his feet, barking orders. "Get every available Jonin and Chunin to the wall. I want an Earth-style team reinforcing the foundation. Medical corps to the lower districts for evacuation." As the council members scrambled, Naruto's mind was racing. A flood. Water. Lots and lots of water. He could feel the familiar thrumming start in his chest, an urgent, frantic beat. He didn't wait for orders. He didn't ask for permission. He just ran. He burst out of the council building and shot toward the source of the tremor, leaping across rooftops with impossible speed. He could already hear it, a deafening roar of rushing water, punctuated by the screams of terrified civilians. He arrived at the scene and his breath caught in his throat. It was worse than he imagined. A massive, jagged hole, 50 feet wide, had been torn in the side of the colossal stone reservoir. A torrential wall of water was pouring out of it, a man-made waterfall of pure destruction, already beginning to swallow the streets of the district below. Shinobi were trying to help, but it was hopeless. Earth-style jutsus crumbled against the immense pressure. A few brave ninja were trying to form a human chain to pull people from the rising waters, but they were being overwhelmed. Somewhere in the chaos, hidden on a distant rooftop, Kashin watched, a cold satisfaction filling him. He had planted the explosive charge himself. Now they would all see. They would see the chaos. They would see the failure of their organized shinobi to contain it. And they would see the monster they harbored be unable to stop it, proving once and for all that his power was useless against true catastrophe. But Naruto wasn't thinking about failing. He was looking at the hole, then at his own body. An idea, born of pure Nika-fueled insanity, sparked in his brain. It was stupid. It was ridiculous. It was probably going to hurt. A lot. But it was the only thing he could think of. A wide, painful grin stretched across his face. "Okay, let's try this," he muttered to himself. He took a running leap from the rooftop, soaring through the air directly toward the breach. "Gomu Gomu no," he screamed, his voice barely audible over the roar of the water. "Fusen." He took a huge gulp of air, and then another, and another. His body began to swell, his orange jacket stretching taut. He inflated like a bizarre, human parade float, his limbs and head comically small compared to his rapidly expanding torso. He was a giant, orange ball. The shinobi on the ground stopped what they were doing and stared, their minds unable to process what they were seeing. Naruto, now a massive, buoyant sphere, positioned himself directly in front of the torrent of water. He hit the breach. The force of millions of gallons of water slammed into him, an unstoppable battering ram of liquid force. The impact was crushing. He felt like every bone in his body was going to be pulverized. But his rubbery form held. It dented, it strained, it groaned under the immense pressure, but it didn't break. He had plugged the hole. The torrent slowed to a trickle. The water level in the streets below stopped rising. He had done it. But the pressure was unimaginable. It was a constant, grinding agony. His vision was starting to go dark at the edges. The grin on his face was now a pained, trembling grimace. But he held on. He had to. He could hear the shinobi below, their stunned silence breaking into a frenzy of organized activity as they began the real evacuation and repair work, given the precious minutes he had bought them. He was saving them. All the people who hated him, who feared him. He was saving them. And through the pain, a genuine, powerful joy bloomed in his chest, and the drumbeat roared to life, giving him the strength to hold on just a little longer. Sasuke Uchiha had watched the entire thing from a safe distance. He had seen the explosion. He had seen the panic. He had seen the Jonin fail. And then he had seen Naruto. He watched as the dobe turned himself into a grotesque, swollen ball and jammed himself into the hole. He saw the grimace of pain on his face, even from this distance. And he saw that it worked. He felt nothing. No admiration. No respect. Only a cold, deepening disgust. This wasn't a solution. It was a crude, disgusting, desperate stopgap. A real shinobi, a powerful one, would have used a jutsu of such scale and power that it would have frozen the entire reservoir, or created a wall of such strength that it would last for eternity. They would have solved the problem with precision and art. Naruto had just plugged it with his own body. It was primal. Uncivilized. It proved nothing, except that he was more monster than man. He turned to leave, his heart heavy with a strange mix of resentment and an emotion he couldn't name. It was the feeling of being left behind, not in power, but in relevance. His entire worldview was being challenged by this orange-clad buffoon. An impressive, if vulgar, display of power. The voice was calm, cultured, and came from right behind him. Sasuke spun around, a kunai instantly in his hand, his Sharingan flaring to life. A man stood there. He wore a simple, elegant gray cloak, and his face was angular and intelligent. It was Kashin. He hadn't made a sound. Sasuke's Sharingan hadn't even perceived his approach. "Who are you?" Sasuke demanded, his stance low and ready. "A friend," Kashin said, holding up his hands in a placating gesture. "One who appreciates order. Discipline. The very things that boy makes a mockery of." He nodded toward the reservoir, where Naruto was still grimly holding back the flood. Sasuke's eyes narrowed, but he didn't lower his kunai. "What do you want?" "I want to offer you a perspective," Kashin said, his voice smooth as silk. He took a small step closer, his eyes fixed on Sasuke's Sharingan. You see that power as an obstacle, something to surpass. I see it as a disease. A cosmic imbalance. The power of chaos, of freedom without consequence, promises liberation but delivers only ruin. Your ancestors, the Uchiha, understood the power of order. The Sharingan itself is a tool to perceive and enforce patterns, to control the flow of battle. He was speaking Sasuke's own thoughts, giving voice to the disgust that had been festering in his heart. That boy's power is born of chaos, Kashin continued, his voice hypnotic. It is a borrowed, parasitic divinity. But true power, lasting power, is forged. It is built from discipline, from control, from an absolute understanding of the laws that govern this world. Not from breaking them with a laugh. He reached into his cloak and pulled out a small, dark stone that seemed to absorb the light around it. Imagine a power, Uchiha Sasuke. A power that doesn't just copy, but imposes. A Mangekyo Sharingan evolved not through the chaos of trauma and loss, but through the perfect discipline of a singular will. The power to enforce absolute order. To command reality to obey your law, not the other way around. He held the stone out to Sasuke. The world does not need a laughing god. It needs a protector. A warden. Someone with the strength and the will to impose order on a world teetering on the brink of chaos. That boy cannot be that person. But you could be. Sasuke stared at the stone, then at Kashin's calm, knowing face. This man understood. He saw Naruto not as a rival, but as an aberration. An error that needed to be corrected. He was offering a path, not just to power, but to purpose. A purpose that felt purer, nobler, than simply avenging his clan. A purpose of saving the world from itself. He didn't take the stone. But he didn't refuse it either. He just listened. Down below, the shinobi had finally erected a stable enough earth wall. Naruto, completely exhausted, deflated with a great whoosh of air and fell, caught just before he hit the ground by a relieved Kakashi. The hero of the day had won a momentary reprieve. But up on the rooftop, the war for the soul of his rival had just begun. Naruto had saved the village, but in doing so, he may have just lost Sasuke forever. Chapter 4, Duet of Liberation. The reprieve was a fragile bubble, and it popped within a day. Naruto was hailed as a hero, but it was a nervous, uneasy heroism. The civilians he had saved looked at him with a baffling mixture of gratitude and deep-seated terror. They thanked him for plugging the reservoir, but they did so from a safe distance, as if he might spontaneously inflate again and crush them. He was no longer the pariah, but he wasn't one of them either. He was something else entirely, a necessary monster, a pet catastrophe. The political fallout was immediate. The fire daimyo, upon hearing of the incident, went silent. The demand for Naruto's surrender was rescinded, but no letter of commendation was sent in its place. It was a clear message: Konoha had handled its problem, for now. The world was watching. Danzo used the incident to his advantage, arguing successfully in a closed-door session that Naruto and Yuta were too volatile to be left unsupervised. They were placed under a form of house arrest, confined to Naruto's small apartment with a rotating guard of ANBU stationed on the rooftop and outside their door. For Naruto, it was a familiar cage, just with more official bars. For Yuta, it was a terrifying echo of her gilded prison on Elegia. They spent their days in the quiet apartment, the world shrunk to 2 small rooms. They talked for hours, filling the silence with stories. Yuta spoke of the Grand Line, of Sky Islands and Fish Men, of her father, the great pirate Shanks, and the crew that was her family. Naruto spoke of his dream to be Hokage, not for the power, but for the acknowledgement, for the moment when everyone in the village would have to look at him and see him, not the monster they imagined. In these quiet moments, their connection deepened. It wasn't a whirlwind romance, it was the slow, steady weaving of 2 lonely souls finding a kindred spirit. He'd make her laugh by subtly stretching his earlobe to an absurd length when the ANBU guard wasn't looking. She'd hum a quiet melody that would soothe the restless energy in his chest, making the small apartment feel less like a prison and more like a sanctuary. But outside their sanctuary, the silent wardens were preparing their next move. They had tested the waters with propaganda and sabotage. Now, it was time for a direct assault. The goal was not conquest. It was a demonstration. The attack came without warning at high noon. It wasn't an invasion from the gates, it was an incursion from within. All across the village, at a dozen strategic points, the air shimmered and warped. 12 squads of warden soldiers materialized from thin air, their sterile white armor a stark contrast to the vibrant colors of the leaf. They moved with a chilling, synchronized efficiency, their movements devoid of wasted motion or emotion. Cashin, the warden lieutenant who had spoken to Sasuke, appeared in the middle of the main market square. He wasn't wearing a helmet this time. His face was calm, his gray eyes sweeping over the panicking civilians with a look of detached pity. People of Konoha, his voice boomed, amplified by some unseen technology. It wasn't a shout, it was a calm, resonant lecture that cut through the screams. We are the silent wardens. We are not your enemies. We are your surgeons. Your reality is afflicted with a cancerous divinity, a being of chaos you know as Naruto Uzumaki. We have come to excise this tumor before it metastasizes. The Konoha shinobi response was swift. The alarm bells tolled, and Jonin and Chunin converged on the warden squads. The fighting began. And almost immediately, the shinobi realized something was horribly wrong. A Chunin launched a fireball jutsu at a warden soldier. The soldier didn't even move. He simply raised a hand, and a field of shimmering, hexagonal energy appeared before him. The fireball hit the field and sizzled into nothing, its chakra completely and utterly negated. Our technology renders your primitive energy manipulation useless, Cashin's voice explained calmly, as if narrating a training exercise. Your jutsu is nullified. Surrender, and we will make this procedure clean and painless. The battle turned into a slaughter. The shinobi, stripped of their ninjutsu, were forced to rely on taijutsu and weaponry. But the wardens were stronger, faster, and their armor could withstand a direct kunai strike. They fought not with the passion of warriors, but with the cold, mathematical precision of machines, disabling Konoha's elite forces one by one. In his apartment, Naruto felt the explosions rattling the building. The ANBU guard outside his door stiffened, then rushed toward the fight, shouting for them to stay inside. Naruto was at the window in an instant, his eyes wide with horror as he watched a squad of wardens systematically dismantle a team of leaf shinobi. They're killing them, he whispered. The beat in his chest was a frantic, panicked staccato. Thump 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 thump. Naruto, no, Yuta said, grabbing his arm. She could feel his power building, a restless, chaotic energy. It's a trap. They want you to go out there. I can't just sit here, he yelled, turning to her, his eyes blazing. That's my village. They're my people, even if they hate me. He ran for the door, but it was Cashin who met him. The warden hadn't bothered with the stairs, he had simply phased through the wall, appearing in the middle of the room like a ghost. He stood between Naruto and the door, his expression unreadable. Naruto Uzumaki, Cashin said, his voice as calm as it had been in the market square. The Chronic Keeper has authorized your containment. Please do not resist. It will only increase the collateral damage. Naruto didn't waste time with words. He lunged, his fist stretching forward in a Gomu Gomu no pistol. But something was wrong. His arm stretched, but it felt sluggish. Heavy. It only extended about 10 feet before it stopped, straining as if hitting an invisible wall. Cashin hadn't moved. He simply watched, his brow furrowed in concentration. Your power, he stated, is an affront to causality. It treats the laws of physics as mere suggestions. He raised a hand, and the air around Naruto seemed to thicken, to grow heavy and oppressive. I am a logician. My ability enforces the fundamental laws of this reality. In my presence, things behave as they should. Naruto tried to jump, but his feet felt like they were stuck in concrete. He tried to inflate his chest, but his lungs wouldn't expand beyond their normal capacity. The playful looseness in his limbs was gone, replaced by a rigid, frustrating normality. He was just a boy again, a boy trapped in a room with a man who could turn off his power. You see, Kashin said, taking a step forward. Without your chaotic anomaly, you are nothing. He lunged, his speed inhuman. He wasn't trying to kill Naruto, but to disable him. His fist, wrapped in a strange energy field, slammed into Naruto's stomach. Naruto, expecting his rubbery body to absorb the blow, was met with the shocking, brutal reality of a normal impact. The air was driven from his lungs in a painful gasp, and he was sent flying backward, crashing into the table, splintering it into pieces. He lay there, groaning, the pain sharp and real. His joy, the fuel for his fire, was being smothered under the oppressive blanket of Kashin's logic. He felt weak. Helpless. Yuta screamed his name. She looked at Naruto, gasping on the floor, and then at the cold, implacable man who had hurt him. The same terror she had felt in the forest, the fear of being a liability, rose up again. But this time, it was mixed with a burning, furious rage. She made a choice. She wasn't going to hide. She wasn't going to sing a song of fear or control. She remembered Naruto's hug, his quiet words. I just need you not to hate me. She remembered their hands clasped together, a silent promise of solidarity. She would not create a fake world. She would fight for the real one. She scrambled away from Kashin, kicking the door open and running out onto the small balcony that overlooked the burning village. Below her, the sounds of battle were a symphony of despair. The shinobi were losing. Hope was fading. She climbed onto the railing, her small figure silhouetted against the smoke-filled sky. She took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the acrid air of her new home. And she began to sing. It started as a low, mournful hum, the sound of a heart breaking. It was the sorrow of her own past, the pain of Naruto's loneliness, the fear of the people below. The melody wove through the streets, and for a moment, the fighting paused. Shinobi and warden alike looked up, drawn by the haunting sound. Then, the song changed. The sorrowful hum was joined by a new sound, a deep, resonant beat, like a single, powerful drum. Doom. The melody began to climb, the tempo quickening. The sadness transformed into defiance. The despair became a burning ember of hope. The lyrics burst from her, clear and powerful, carried on the wind of her devil fruit power. She sang of breaking chains, of a dawn that was coming. She sang of a laughter that could shatter mountains, of a freedom so absolute it could rewrite the stars. She sang of a warrior of liberation, a joyful, ridiculous sun god who fought for the smiles of children. She wasn't just singing a song. She was telling Naruto's story. She was telling the world who he really was. Down in the apartment, Naruto heard it. The song washed over him, through him. It was the melody from the training grounds, the one that had made his power surge, but now it was 1,000 times stronger, forged in the fires of battle and love. It was a lifeline thrown to his drowning soul. He felt the heavy, oppressive logic of Kashin's power begin to fray at the edges, cracked by the sheer emotional force of her song. And deep within him, the dying drumbeat answered her call. Do thump. It was quiet at first, a faint echo. But Yuta's song was the fuel, her voice the bellows. Do thump. Do thump. The beat grew stronger, faster, matching the tempo of her anthem. Naruto pushed himself up from the wreckage of the table, a strange, white steam beginning to pour from his body. Kashin stared, his calm facade finally breaking. Impossible. My field is absolute, a low chuckle escaped Naruto's lips. It started soft, then grew louder, deeper, until it was a full-throated, manic, irrepressible laugh that seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. Aha! Ahahaha! Ahahahaha! His hair, once spiky and blonde, seemed to melt and flow like liquid fire, turning a stark, brilliant white. His orange jacket and black shorts bleached to the same snowy color. His eyes glowed with a fiery golden light, his pupils transforming into strange, ringed shapes. The whisker marks on his cheeks grew thicker, more stylized. A cloud of steam, like a divine sash, wreathed itself around his neck and shoulders. The oppressive weight of Cashin's logic shattered like glass. The very air in the room came alive, fizzing and vibrating with a new, impossible energy. Doom-dada doom-dada doom-dada. The drums of liberation were beating at full volume. The sun god had awakened. Gear 5th was here. What are you? Cashin stammered, taking an involuntary step back. The boy before him was gone, replaced by a being of pure, unadulterated freedom. Naruto, or the being that was now Naruto, stopped laughing. He looked at Cashin, his head tilted at a curious, impossible angle. His grin was a thing of terrifying, joyful madness. "I'm the guy who's gonna kick your butt," he declared, his voice layered with a strange, echoing resonance. He didn't run. He bounced. The floor turned to rubber beneath his feet, and he shot toward Cashin like a pinball. Cashin, his primary ability rendered useless, reacted with pure combat training, throwing a punch reinforced with all his physical might. Naruto didn't dodge it. He met it with his face. Splat. Cashin's fist connected, but instead of the brutal crunch of bone, Naruto's face simply indented. His features stretched and warped around the fist like clay, his eyes bulging out on stalks. He looked completely unharmed, merely inconvenienced. "Boop," Naruto said, his voice muffled by his own distorted face. With a motion that defied physics, his head snapped back into shape, and he spun around, his legs stretching and wrapping around Cashin's torso 3 times. Gomu Gomu no. Whiplash. He yanked, and Cashin was sent spinning through the air like a top, crashing through the wall and out into the open air. Naruto bounced after him, his laughter echoing across the battlefield. Below, the shinobi and wardens alike had stopped fighting, their battle forgotten as they stared at the sky. They watched as the white-haired, white-clothed boy, wreathed in steam, literally ran on the air, his feet finding purchase on nothing. He moved with the fluid, nonsensical grace of a cartoon character, chasing after the tumbling form of the warden commander. Yuta's song swelled to a triumphant crescendo, her voice the soundtrack to his liberation. The entire village could hear her now, her anthem of hope a stark contrast to the destruction around them. And they saw him. The demon child. The monster. He was laughing, fighting with a power that was absurd, ridiculous, and undeniably, joyful. He wasn't a laughing god of destruction. He was a laughing warrior of protection. Naruto caught up to Cashin in midair. He grabbed the warden's ankle. "Going down?" he asked cheerfully. He began to spin him around and around, faster and faster, like a human bola. Gomu Gomu no. Giga pistol. He let go. But before Cashin could fly away, Naruto inflated his fist to the size of a small house, the knuckles alone bigger than a man. The fist flew through the air, completely untethered from his arm, and slammed into Cashin with the force of a meteor. There was no blood, no gore. Just a comical, star-shaped imprint on Cashin's armor as he was blasted out of the sky, crashing into the Hokage monument with enough force to crack the stone face of the second Hokage. Naruto landed lightly on a rooftop, the giant floating fist shrinking and zipping back to reattach to his wrist. He looked around at the remaining warden squads, who were staring at him in abject terror. He gave them a giant, toothy grin and cracked his knuckles. The wardens did not wait for a second invitation. They broke. The disciplined, emotionless soldiers dropped their weapons and fled, activating their emergency transponders to phase out of reality. In less than a minute, every warden was gone. The village was silent. The fires still burned, but the fighting was over. The shinobi, the civilians, the elders on the council, they all stared at the white figure standing on the rooftop, his steam sash billowing in the wind. His divine form receded. The white hair and clothes faded back to blonde and orange. The steam evaporated. He was just Naruto again, breathing heavily, looking exhausted but exhilarated. He turned his head, his gaze finding the small figure on the balcony. He looked at Yuta. Her song had faded, but the echo of it still hung in the air. She was looking back at him, tears streaming down her face, a radiant, beautiful smile on her lips. He gave her a tired, goofy grin. Without thinking, he crouched and leaped, his body still humming with a fraction of Nika's power. He sailed through the air, clearing the distance between the rooftop and her balcony in a single, graceful arc. He landed softly in front of her. The divine energy, the chaos of Nika and the order of the Yuta no Mi, crackled in the air between them. They had fought together, their powers and their hearts resonating in a perfect, impossible duet. He was no longer just a vessel for Joy Boy, he was Naruto Uzumaki, powered by the song of the woman he loved. She was no longer a tragic idol, she was Yuta, the songstress who gave a voice to the sun. He gently took her hand. His chaotic, world-bending power didn't frighten her at all. It felt like home. "You have a really pretty voice," he said, his voice soft, all the manic energy gone, leaving only a deep, sincere warmth. "You have a really great laugh," she whispered back. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the battered village, he leaned in. The entire world, having heard her song and witnessed his impossible power, watched in stunned, silent awe. They kissed for the first time, a gentle, hesitant press of lips that sealed a bond forged in loneliness and tempered in battle. It was a kiss bathed in the dawn of their new, combined, and terrifyingly powerful existence. Chapter 5, The Chronokeeper's Elegy. The kiss was an anchor in a sea of chaos. For a fleeting moment, there was no burning village, no shattered monument, no godlike powers. There was only Naruto and Yuta, two lonely souls who had found their harbor in each other on a small, dusty balcony. The world fell away, leaving only the warmth of her lips against his and the soft, steady rhythm of the drums of liberation purring in his chest like a contented lion. But the moment, like all perfect things, was fragile. It was broken by a sound. Not an explosion or a scream, but a soft, resonant chime, like a single, perfectly struck bell. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, cutting through the smoky air with an unnatural clarity. Every person in the village, from the lowest genin to the Hokage himself, froze. The sound commanded attention on a primal level. Naruto and Yuta broke apart, their heads snapping up, searching for the source. The sky above the Hokage monument began to shimmer, not with the violent tear of Yuta's arrival, but with a smooth, seamless distortion, as if the fabric of reality was being gently parted like a curtain. From this distortion, a figure descended. He did not fall, he simply arrived, his feet touching the top of the first Hokage's stone head without a sound. He was tall and agelessly handsome, with silver hair that flowed like liquid metal and eyes the color of a winter twilight. He wore a long, immaculate white coat, unadorned with any rank or symbol. He radiated an aura not of power, but of absolute, unshakable authority. This was not a soldier. This was a king. Or a judge. He surveyed the damaged village below, his expression one of profound, weary sadness, like a master artisan looking upon a beautiful tapestry that had been hopelessly frayed. "So this is the consequence of your freedom," he said. His voice was not amplified, yet it carried across the entire village, each word reaching every person with perfect clarity, as if whispered directly into their ear. A symphony of chaos, conducted by a laughing god and his tragic muse. Beautiful in its own destructive way, I suppose. Hiruzen Sarutobi, standing amidst the rubble of the main street, felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. This man's presence dwarfed Kashin's. It dwarfed the Kyubi. It felt ancient, cosmic, and utterly final. On the balcony, Naruto instinctively stepped in front of Yuta, his body still humming with the residual energy of Gear 5th. The joyful rhythm in his chest had changed, the playful beat turning into a low, guttural, defensive growl. Thumker thumker. This new arrival was a predator of a different order. Who are you? Naruto called out, his voice sharp. The figure's gaze drifted from the village and settled upon them. His winter-gray eyes seemed to see through them, past their skin and bone, into the very core of their beings where their powers resided. I have many names, the man said, his voice laced with an infinite patience. In some fallen realities, I was the architect. In others, the final arbiter. But you may call me the Chronokeeper. I am the leader of the Silent Wardens, though my role is not to command, but to correct. He took a step to the edge of the monument, looking down at them not with malice, but with a sort of clinical pity. I am not here to fight you, child of joy. And I am not here to harm your songstress. I am here to teach. Before anyone could react, the world changed. The sky, the village, the setting sun, it all dissolved into a swirling mist of gray. Naruto, Yuta, Hiruzen, Danzo, the clan heads, every shinobi in the village, found themselves standing not in Konoha, but in an infinite, empty gray space. They were not physically there, it was a projection, a shared consciousness, a classroom of the mind created by the Chronokeeper. Then, the images began. They were floating in deep space, watching a vibrant, blue-green world. This was Xylos, the Chronokeeper's voice narrated, as he stood calmly amongst them, a teacher in his lecture hall. A peaceful, philosophical people. They had solved scarcity, war, and disease. Theirs was a society of perfect harmony. Then, a figure appeared in their orbit. A being of white, wreathed in steam, with a manic grin and laughter that boomed in the silent void. It was another Nika user, from an age-long past. He touched the planet. He offered them the gift of liberation, the Chronokeeper said, his voice devoid of emotion. He broke their societal structures, their philosophies, their very concept of cooperation. He taught them that absolute individual freedom was the ultimate prize. The image fast-forwarded. They watched as the Xylosian society crumbled. Liberated from the need to work together, their infrastructure failed. Factions formed, warring over the scraps of their once perfect world. The planet burned. The final image was of a barren, dead rock, scarred by nuclear fire, drifting silently in space. The scene changed. They were watching another civilization, this one a hive mind of crystalline beings. The laughing god appeared again, shattering their collective consciousness into billions of terrified, screaming individuals. The chaos was so absolute it caused their star to go supernova. World after world. Civilization after civilization. The Chronokeeper showed them 100 realities, all brought to ruin by the same smiling, laughing, white-haired god. They saw Joy Boy, the original, leading an army of liberated slaves who then turned on each other the moment their masters were defeated. They saw a Nika user who freed a planet from the tyranny of gravity itself, causing the entire world to disintegrate into a cloud of dust and rock. Joy Boy is not a hero, the Chronokeeper stated, the images fading back to the gray void. He is a virus. A cosmic principle of pure, unadulterated chaos. He promises freedom, but what he delivers is anarchy. The freedom to starve. The freedom to murder. The freedom to drive your entire civilization to extinction because you have been liberated from the consequences of your actions. His words were not angry. They were a statement of historical fact, backed by a mountain of terrifying evidence. Naruto stared, his blood running cold. The laughter of the figures on the screen, it was his laughter. The drumbeat he heard in their wake, it was his drumbeat. The power he felt, the joy he cherished, was being painted as a galaxy-ending plague. His confidence, his simple conviction that his power was a force for good, was being systematically dismantled. Then, the Chronokeeper turned his attention to Yuta. "And you, little songbird," he said, his voice softening with a chilling sympathy. "Your power is no less catastrophic. It is the antithesis of Nika's chaos, but just as deadly. You offer a cage of perfect, curated joy." The scene changed again. They were on a world that looked like a paradise. Everyone was smiling, holding hands, singing in unison. But their eyes were vacant, empty. This was a world touched by a power like yours. A songstress of worlds who, like you, wanted only to create a world of happiness and peace. She succeeded. He gestured, and the perspective zoomed in. They saw the smiling people, and then they saw through them. Their bodies were withering, their life force draining away, siphoned off to sustain the grand illusion, the perfect song. She did not create a utopia, the Chronokeeper said softly. She created a battery farm. She drained the collective consciousness of her universe to power her dream, leaving behind a husk of mindless, smiling drones. Your taught Musica was but a fledgling attempt at this. Given time, your power would not create a new Genesis, it would cause a silent, happy apocalypse. Yuta let out a small, strangled gasp. He was showing her the ultimate conclusion of her darkest temptation. He was validating the deepest fear she had about herself, that her desire to bring happiness was, at its core, a monstrously selfish act of consumption. The projection dissolved. They were back in Konoha, the smoke and the setting sun all too real. The weight of what they had seen was crushing. Hope had been replaced by a deep, philosophical dread. The Chronokeeper stood before them all on the monument, a figure of absolute, unassailable reason. "I am not a tyrant," he said, his voice once again carrying to every corner of the village. "I do not desire to rule you. I am a gardener, and your reality has sprouted two world-ending weeds. I am here to prune them before they strangle the entire garden." He laid out his offer, his voice calm and final. "I will give you 1 week. 7 of your solar cycles. In that time, you will deliberate. At the end of that week, you will deliver Naruto Uzumaki and the girl Yuta to me. They will not be harmed. The boy will be placed in a timeless stasis field, his chaotic power neutralized forever, but his consciousness will be allowed to live in a dream of his own choosing. The girl's abilities will be permanently and painlessly sealed, allowing her to live a normal life. They will be sacrifices, yes, but their sacrifice will guarantee the survival of your world." His gaze swept over the village, meeting the eyes of every person. "This is the only alternative. If you refuse, if you choose to harbor these walking apocalypses, then I will have no choice but to enact the Chronos Anvil Protocol. I will prune this reality. I will not destroy your world, I will erase it from the timeline, retroactively and completely. It will be as if your dimension, your history, your very existence, never was. It is a regrettable but necessary measure to prevent the infection from spreading." He paused, letting the sheer, unimaginable weight of his ultimatum sink in. The choice was simple: sacrifice 2 children, or have their entire universe deleted from existence. 1 week, he repeated. Then, as soundlessly as he arrived, he turned and stepped back into the shimmering distortion, which sealed behind him, leaving only the setting sun and an atmosphere of absolute dread. Later that night, in a secluded, forgotten corner of the Uchiha district, the air shimmered. The Chronokeeper stepped out, his presence cloaked from all but one. Sasuke stood waiting for him, his Sharingan active, his face a mask of stone. "You saw the truth of his power," the Chronokeeper said. "It wasn't a question." "I saw chaos," Sasuke replied, his voice low. "Precisely." The Chronokeeper glided closer, his movements unnaturally smooth. "And you saw how your village's leaders reacted. Awe. Fear. But ultimately, acceptance. They will choose to gamble their existence on the hope that their pet monster can be controlled. They are sentimental fools, just as your brother was." The mention of Itachi made Sasuke flinch. "Do not mistake me," the Chrono Keeper said gently. Itachi Uchiha acted to preserve order. He made a terrible, brutal choice to prevent a civil war that would have destroyed your village. He chose the needs of the many over the few. A sound, logical decision. He stopped in front of Sasuke, his twilight eyes seeming to pierce the boy's soul. But his methods were born of the very chaos he sought to prevent. He used trauma, emotion, and loss to shape you. He gave you hatred as a tool. A chaotic, unpredictable emotion. It is an imperfect solution. He projected an image from the palm of his hand. It was a projection of the Uchiha clan's massacre. Sasuke watched, his fists clenching, as his parents fell. But the Chrono Keeper framed it differently. He highlighted the emotional outbursts, the chaos of the coup, the fearful whispers that had led to their isolation. He painted the Uchiha's downfall not as a political assassination, but as the inevitable result of a clan that allowed its powerful emotions, the very source of the Sharingan's evolution, to run unchecked. The curse of hatred, the Chrono Keeper murmured. That is what your people called it. An apt name. Power born from the chaos of loss is inherently unstable. But what if there was another way? He made the image disappear and produced the dark, light-absorbing stone he had shown Sasuke before. This is a seed of order. It is a crystallization of pure, unadulterated law. It will not grant you power through the messy, chaotic process of trauma. It will allow you to evolve your Mangekyo Sharingan through discipline. Through a singular, focused act of will. A choice to dedicate yourself to the principle of absolute order. He offered the stone to Sasuke. Help me. Help me take the girl. Her power is the key to neutralizing Uzumaki's. Without his muse, his chaotic divinity will be crippled. In return, I will give you the means to forge a power that can truly protect this world. A power not of chaos, but of control. The power to become this world's ultimate warden. Sasuke looked from the stone to the Chrono Keeper's calm, logical face. Everything this man said resonated with the cold, hard part of his soul that had been forged in the fire of his family's slaughter. Order. Control. A world without the messy, painful chaos of emotion. A world where something like the massacre could never happen again. He saw Naruto's laughing face, his ridiculous, bouncing movements. He saw the chaos that everyone else was starting to see as hope. And he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that it was a lie. He reached out and took the stone. It felt cold and heavy in his hand, a tangible anchor of purpose in a world gone mad. Naruto sat on the edge of his bed, staring at his own hands. These were the hands that had plugged the reservoir. The hands that had fought Kashin. The hands that had held Yuta's. And, if the Chrono Keeper was to be believed, they were the hands that would one day tear the world apart in a fit of joyous laughter. The Nika form, the boundless power of Gear 5th, now felt like a curse. The drums of liberation, once a source of strength and joy, now sounded like a funeral dirge for a future he might destroy. His confidence, the bedrock of his identity, was shattered. What if the villagers had been right all along? What if he really was a monster, just a more cheerful one than the Kyuubi? Yuta sat beside him, equally lost. She had wrapped herself in her blanket again, a futile shield against the cosmic horror the Chrono Keeper had revealed. Her dream of a new Genesis, her desire to bring happiness, was just a pretty mask for a power that consumed souls. He had shown her the monster in her own heart. Maybe he's right, Naruto said, his voice a hollow echo of its usual vibrancy. Maybe it would be better if I just went with him. You could get your power sealed. You could be safe. You could have a normal life. Yuta looked at him, her eyes wide. And you'd be trapped in a box forever? In a fake dream? It might be better than the real world, if I'm just going to break it, he mumbled, unable to meet her gaze. A surge of anger, fierce and protective, cut through Yuta's despair. She grabbed his chin and forced him to look at her. Don't you dare, she said, her voice shaking but firm. Don't you dare let that silver-haired monster get in your head. Did you see those visions? Those other Joy Boys? They were alone. They didn't have anyone. And the people they liberated were just as lost. She took his hands in hers, her grip surprisingly strong. Your power isn't a curse, Naruto. It's a part of you. The Chronic Keeper is afraid of it because he can't control it. He talks about order, but it's the order of a graveyard. A world with no laughter, no surprises, no joy. She leaned closer, her forehead touching his. I don't care what some cosmic librarian says my power could do. I know what it did. It helped you. It gave you strength. And your power, your impossible, ridiculous power, it didn't just save the village. It saved me. It showed me that it was okay to be sad, and then it made me laugh. Tears streamed down her face, but her voice was strong. Our powers aren't a curse. They're a duet. And we're the ones who get to choose what song we play. Naruto stared into her eyes, seeing not the reflection of a monster, but the reflection of a boy she believed in. Her faith was a shield against the Chronic Keeper's crushing logic. It didn't fix the doubt, but it gave him something to fight for again. Not for the village, not for the world, but for her. For the belief in her eyes. He squeezed her hands, a silent thank you. They were still trapped, still facing an impossible choice. But they were together. And for now, that was enough. The chapter of their story was far from over, and they would be the ones to write the ending, not some self-proclaimed god of order. Chapter 6, The Sound of Betrayal. The week was a slow-burning fuse. Konoha held its breath, suspended in a state of collective anxiety. The village was a paradox of activity and stillness. Shinobi worked tirelessly to repair the damage from the warden's attack, the rhythmic sounds of hammers and jutsu-assisted construction echoing through the streets. But the usual vibrant chatter of the marketplace was gone, replaced by hushed, nervous conversations. Every eye was on the Hokage Tower, waiting for a decision that would determine the fate of their reality. Inside the tower, the debate was a bitter, circular hell. The civilian council, terrified by the Chronic Keeper's ultimatum, overwhelmingly favored surrender. The clan heads were divided. The Nara clan, ever pragmatic, argued that sacrificing two for the sake of billions was a cold but logical necessity. The Hyuga were silent and watchful, their Byakugan seeing the turmoil in everyone's chakra but offering no solution. The Akimichi and Yamanaka clans, whose children were Naruto's friends, argued passionately for his defense. Danzo was a voice of chilling reason, advocating not for surrender, but for a third option. We hand them over, he'd proposed, but first, we learn everything we can. We take samples of the Jinchuriki's genetic material. We force the girl to detail the mechanics of her power. We turn this defeat into an acquisition of priceless intelligence. Hiruzen, old and weary, fought against them all. He had brought in Jiraiya, the Toad Sage, whose network of spies had picked up whispers of the Silent Wardens years ago. Jiraiya, boisterous and larger than life, was a storm of defiance in the stuffy council chambers. You're all fools, he bellowed, slamming his fist on the table. You'd hand over Minato's legacy and a power that can rewrite reality because some silver-haired stiff gave you a history lesson. Power isn't good or evil. It's a tool. The kid's got the heart of a hero. We fight. We find a weakness. We don't sacrifice our own. But his words, passionate as they were, felt like shouting against a hurricane. The fear of erasure was a more potent argument than any appeal to loyalty. For Naruto and Yuta, the world had shrunk to the size of the apartment and the small, sun-drenched patch of roof they were allowed access to under the watchful eyes of their ANBU guards. They didn't speak of the Chronic Keeper or the impossible choice. Instead, they clung to a fragile, precious normality. They played card games that Naruto usually lost. Yuta tried to teach him a song from her world, but he was hopelessly, comically tone-deaf. Naruto showed her how to mold chakra, a feat she found bizarrely difficult, her body unused to the flow of an energy that wasn't tied to her voice. They talked about the future, a future they both knew might not exist. They planned to travel the world, to see the sky islands Yuta spoke of. Naruto promised to introduce her to a real toad, not just a drawing. Yuta vowed to write a song about his first time successfully walking on water. These conversations were acts of defiance, a refusal to let the Chrono Keeper's ultimatum steal the time they had left. One afternoon, they sat on the roof, watching the clouds drift by. The silence between them was comfortable, intimate. "Do you ever miss it?" Naruto asked quietly. "Your world?" Yuta thought for a moment, her gaze distant. "I miss my father," she said. "I miss my friends. The smell of the sea. But I was so alone there, even when I was surrounded by millions of fans. They loved the idol. The symbol. They didn't know me." She turned to look at him, a small, genuine smile gracing her lips. "Here. I'm just Yuta. And you're just Naruto. I think I like that better." Naruto felt a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the sun. He reached out and took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. They didn't need to say anything else. But while they were finding solace in each other, Sasuke was finding purpose in the dark. He had made his choice. The cold stone the Chrono Keeper had given him, the seed of order, was a constant weight in his pocket. He didn't believe he was betraying his village. He believed he was saving it. He was performing a necessary surgery, just as Itachi had. He was cutting out the cancer of chaos before it could consume everything. He spent the week in quiet, intense meditation, the stone held in his hand. He didn't focus on hatred or loss. He focused on a singular, crystalline concept, order. Perfect, absolute, unyielding order. A world where there were no unpredictable variables, no emotional outbursts, no laughing gods to shatter the rules. He felt the stone resonate with his will, a cold power seeping into his chakra network, rewriting his very being. The evolution of his Sharingan was not a painful eruption of emotion, but a cold, quiet dawn. On the 6th day, Sasuke sought out the warden commander, Kashin, who had been hiding in a pocket dimension anchored to the village, awaiting his master's return. Sasuke, now able to perceive such dimensional seams with his evolving eyes, found him easily. He didn't come with questions or doubts. He came with a plan. A brilliant, ruthless, strategic plan that used his intimate knowledge of Konoha's defenses, its protocols, and most importantly, Naruto's emotional state. "He will not be expecting an attack now," Sasuke explained, his voice devoid of all warmth. "He believes he has until tomorrow. We will create a diversion, something big enough to draw his attention, something that looks like an external threat. While he is occupied, I will lead your team directly to the girl. Her power is the linchpin. We neutralize her first, and his main strength, his absurd emotional resilience, will crumble." Kashin looked at the boy, at the cold fire in his eyes. He saw the Uchiha prodigy reborn not as an avenger, but as a zealot of their cause. The Chrono Keeper had chosen well. An excellent plan, Kashin approved. Simple. Efficient. Orderly. Sasuke just nodded. "Get your team ready. We move at dusk." Dusk painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, the colors of a bruise. A sudden, massive explosion rocked the northern wall of the village. It was followed by a chorus of monstrous roars. A horde of massive, grotesque summons, creatures that looked like twisted amalgamations of various animals, began to tear at the village defenses. It was a classic, brute force diversion. Naruto and Yuta shot to their feet on the rooftop. The ANBU guards around them stiffened, their attention immediately drawn to the attack. "It's the wardens. They're attacking early," one of the ANBU yelled into his comm. "Stay here," another commanded Naruto and Yuta, before he and the rest of the squad flickered away, heading toward the breach. Naruto's heart hammered in his chest. They lied. That silver-haired jerk lied. He was vibrating with rage and a desperate need to act. The beat was already starting, a frantic war drum. He had to get out there. He had to fight. Naruto, wait. Yuta said, grabbing his arm, her eyes wide with suspicion. Something's not right. This feels too clumsy for them. Too loud. But Naruto was already in motion. I don't care. I'm not letting them tear up my home again. He leaped from the roof, his body already crackling with the nascent energy of Gear 5th. He was a flash of orange, disappearing toward the northern wall, his entire being focused on the decoy threat. The moment he was gone, the air in his apartment shimmered. 8 figures materialized inside, Kashin and 7 of his elite warden soldiers. And leading them, stepping out of the shadows, was Sasuke Uchiha. Yuta backed away, her heart seizing with terror. She had been right. It was a trap. Sasuke, she whispered, her voice trembling. She saw the look in his eyes. The familiar arrogance was there, but it was coated with a layer of something new. A cold, chilling emptiness. He can't protect you now, Sasuke said, his voice flat. He took a step forward. The Mangekyo Sharingan in his eyes spun to life. It was a new pattern, not the one from the history books. It was a cold, geometric design, like a perfectly cut snowflake of black and red. It was a pattern of absolute order. What are you doing? Yuta cried, her mind reeling. Naruto is your teammate. Your friend. He is a variable that cannot be controlled, Sasuke stated, as if reciting a doctrine. He is a flaw in the system. I am correcting the error. He raised a hand. He wasn't preparing a jutsu. He was activating his new power. My right eye grants me axiom, he explained, his voice detached, clinical. The power to impose an absolute, undeniable law upon a target. And the law I impose upon you, songstress, is this, silence. Yuta opened her mouth to sing. To scream. To do something. Nothing came out. No sound. No hum. Not even a breath. It was as if her vocal cords had ceased to exist. She clutched at her throat, her eyes wide with panic. The power of the Yuta no Mi, the wellspring of her identity, was gone. The connection to her own voice, the very core of her being, had been severed. It was a violation more profound than any physical wound. She stumbled back, a silent scream trapped behind her lips. The world, which had always been a symphony of ambient noise and potential melodies to her, was now utterly, terrifyingly quiet. The warden soldiers moved in, their hands holding devices that crackled with energy-suppressing fields. At the northern wall, Naruto was a whirlwind of joyful destruction. He had activated Gear 5th, his white-hot laughter echoing as he bounced around the battlefield, turning the grotesque summons into rubbery playthings. He tied one monster's legs into a knot, causing it to trip over itself. He used another as a giant, fleshy slingshot to launch a third into the stratosphere. It was easy. Too easy. These creatures were strong, but they were mindless. They lacked the coordination and strategic threat of the wardens. As he turned another beast into a puddle of goo with a giant, cartoonish fist, a chilling realization dawned on him. Yuta's voice cut through his thoughts. Something's not right. This feels too clumsy. A diversion. His heart dropped into his stomach. The manic grin vanished from his face, replaced by a mask of pure horror. The drums of liberation, which had been pounding with the thrill of battle, suddenly stuttered, the beat becoming erratic, panicked. He abandoned the fight, ignoring the remaining monsters. He turned and shot back toward his apartment, moving faster than he ever had before, a white comet streaking across the night sky. He wasn't laughing anymore. He arrived to a scene of devastation. The door to his apartment was torn from its hinges. The inside was wrecked. And standing in the middle of it all, amidst the splintered remains of his table and chairs, was Sasuke. Yuta was gone. "Sasuke, where is she?" Naruto's voice was a low, dangerous growl. His gear fifth form was flickering, the white steam sputtering, his joyous power struggling to maintain itself in the face of the cold dread that was flooding his soul. "She has been contained," Sasuke said calmly, turning to face him. His Mangekyo blazed. "It's over, Naruto. We have won. The world will have order. Where is she?" Naruto roared, the sound ripping from his throat. Grief, pure and absolute, overwhelmed him. It was a tidal wave of pain that crashed against the shores of his power. The drums of liberation, the heartbeat of Joy Boy, could not function in this desolate landscape. Joy was its fuel, and all the joy had been ripped out of him. His body convulsed. The white hair and clothes receded, the steam vanished. He was just Naruto again, a heartbroken boy in a torn orange jacket. He was weaker, smaller, but his rage was infinite. He lunged at Sasuke, his movements clumsy, desperate. It wasn't a battle. It was a beating. Sasuke moved with a cold, effortless grace. He didn't even need his new Mangekyo ability. His taijutsu was precise, his movements economical. He was a surgeon, methodically dissecting Naruto's grief-stricken attacks. He sidestepped a wild punch, chopping Naruto at the back of the neck. Naruto stumbled. Sasuke swept his legs out from under him. As Naruto fell, Sasuke delivered a brutal, precise kick to his ribs. A sickening crack echoed in the ruined apartment. Naruto cried out, a raw sound of pain and despair. He tried to get up, to fight, but his body wouldn't obey. His vision swam. Sasuke stood over him, his expression unpitying. He looked down at the boy who had once been his rival, his friend. He felt a flicker of something, pity. Regret? He crushed it. It was a chaotic, useless emotion. "This is for the good of the world, Naruto," Sasuke said, his voice quiet. "One day, you might even understand." He turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing in the silence. He didn't look back. He melted into the shadows of the doorway and was gone, leaving Naruto alone in the wreckage of his home and his heart. Naruto lay on the floor, broken. The physical pain in his ribs was nothing compared to the gaping, cavernous wound in his soul. He reached out a trembling hand toward the empty doorway where Yuta had been taken. The drums of liberation were silent. For the first time since a lonely, forgotten child had accidentally eaten a strange, purple fruit, Naruto Uzumaki felt the full, crushing weight of absolute, hopeless despair. His body shook with ragged, choked sobs. He was alone. Utterly and completely alone. The boy who was the sun had been extinguished, leaving a broken child weeping in the dark. Chapter 7, Symphony of the Unchained Sun. The rain fell on Konoha for 3 straight days, a miserable, persistent drizzle that mirrored the village's mood. It washed the soot from the buildings but did nothing to cleanse the atmosphere of dread. The northern wall was repaired, the decoy summons disposed of, but the silence from the Hokage Tower was the most damning injury of all. The 7th day was approaching. The deadline. Naruto didn't move. For 3 days, he lay in the ruins of his apartment, which the ANBU had cordoned off as a crime scene. Jiraiya had tried to move him, to take him to the hospital, but Naruto had refused with a silence so profound it was more intimidating than any shout. The broken ribs had begun to mend, courtesy of the Kyuubi's passive healing, but the real damage wasn't to his body. His spirit was shattered. The world was muted. The vibrant colors he'd always seen now looked washed out and gray. The ever-present, joyful rhythm in his chest, the constant companion of his entire life, was gone. The silence was an abyss, a hollow space where the drums of liberation used to be. He had tried to summon his power, to feel that familiar stretchiness in his limbs, but there was nothing. It was like trying to flex a phantom limb. The wellspring of his strength, his joy, was gone, taken along with Yuta. He stared at the ceiling, replaying Sasuke's words, seeing his cold, empty eyes. I am correcting the error. The betrayal was a poison that had seeped into his very soul, more painful than the loneliness he had grown up with. Loneliness was an absence. This was a presence, an active, gnawing pain. On the evening of the third day, as the rain finally began to subside, a voice rumbled in the back of his mind. It was not a voice he sought out, but one he had learned to live with, a hateful, simmering presence deep within the seal. Are you just going to lie there and die, you pathetic brat? The voice of the nine-tailed fox, Kurama, was laced with its usual contempt, but there was an undercurrent of something else. Impatience. Annoyance. Naruto didn't answer. He didn't have the energy. This is pitiful, Kurama growled, the mental sound like grinding stones. I have been sealed inside mewling humans for centuries, but you are the most infuriating of them all. You possessed the power of a god, and you let a moody child with fancy eyes snuff it out like a candle. He took her, Naruto thought, the words a silent, broken whisper in his mind. It's my fault. I wasn't strong enough. A harsh, grating laugh echoed in his internal space. Strong enough? You think that power came from your strength? You think it was about how hard you could punch or how far you could stretch? The giant fox paced within its cage, its 9 tails lashing in agitation. I have watched this joy boy power from the inside. I've felt its rhythm. It is not fueled by happiness, you fool. Happiness is its byproduct. That got Naruto's attention. He stirred, a flicker of confusion cutting through his apathy. Kurama stopped pacing, its massive, slitted red eye fixing on Naruto's consciousness. That power is fueled by something else. Something you had in spades until you lost it. It is the will to bring joy to others. The desire for their freedom. It is not an emotion, it is an act. A choice. You fought the wardens not because you were happy, but because you wanted to protect the smiles of the people in this village, even if they scorned you. You awakened your true power not because you felt joy, but because you heard that girl's song and chose to become the hero she was singing about. The Fox's words were a lightning strike in the fog of Naruto's depression. He remembered Yuta's voice, her anthem of hope. He remembered the feeling of becoming the warrior in her song. Right now, Kurama continued, its voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl, you are wallowing in your own self-pity. You are mourning your own lost joy. And so, the drums are silent. That power does not answer to selfish sorrow. It answers to a will that is greater than yourself. You want your power back? Then stop thinking about your own pain and start thinking about her. The image of Yuta's face, pale with terror as she was taken, flashed in Naruto's mind. The sound of her silent scream. The way her power had been stolen from her. The Chrono Keeper hadn't just taken her away, he had muted her soul. A new emotion, cold and sharp, began to cut through the grief. It wasn't the wild, chaotic rage of before. It was a focused, diamond-hard resolve. A purpose. He wasn't going to fight to get Yuta back so he could be happy again. He was going to fight to set her free. To hear her sing again. Her freedom, her joy, was the mission. His own was irrelevant. He pushed himself up, his bones creaking, his broken ribs sending a sharp protest through his body. He ignored it. He stood, shaky but upright, in the wreckage of his apartment. Something flickered in his chest. Thump. It was faint, barely perceptible. A single, solitary beat. A question. Naruto closed his eyes and focused on it. He poured all his will, all his newfound purpose, into that single point of light in the abyss. I will free her. Thump. Thump. It was still weak, still fragile. But it was there. The drums were listening. He walked out of the apartment, past the stunned ANBU guards. He didn't look at them. His eyes were fixed on the Hokage tower. He had 2 days left. And he was going to start a war. Jiraiya found him in the Hokage's office, standing before a stunned Hiruzen. Kakashi was there too, leaning against a wall, his single visible eye conveying a deep, weary guilt. He had been assigned to Naruto's protection. He had failed. "I need a team," Naruto said, his voice raspy but firm. There were no jokes, no boasts. All the childish energy had been burned away, leaving behind a young man with the eyes of a veteran. "And I need a way to get to them." Jiraiya stepped forward, a grim smile on his face. "Now that's more like it, kid. Lying around moping isn't your style." He looked at Hiruzen. "The council is still leaning toward surrender. They think you're a broken weapon now, Naruto. They think the threat is neutralized." "Good," Naruto said, the word cold. "Let them think that. We'll move without their approval." "Move where?" Kakashi asked, his voice low. "The Chrono Keeper's fortress isn't in our reality. It exists outside of normal time-space. We can't just walk there. My spy network has acquisitions," Jiraiya said, pulling a strange, multifaceted crystal from his pouch. It looked similar to the one Kashin had used, but it was inert. "It's a Warden dimensional anchor. Broken, but I might be able to reverse engineer its frequency. If we can broadcast a signal on the same dimensional wavelength, we might be able to force a temporary gateway open. It'll be unstable, and it won't last long." "It's enough," Naruto said. His gaze fell on Kakashi. "Kakashi-sensei. I need you." Kakashi pushed himself off the wall, a flicker of his old self returning. "I let my guard down. I let Sasuke walk right into your home. I owe you more than one, Naruto. We need more firepower," Jiraiya mused. "The Warden soldiers are tough, and their technology nullifies most ninjutsu." As if on cue, the window to the office slid open. A gust of wind and sand swirled into the room, coalescing into a figure. Gaara of the desert stood there, his arms crossed, his turquoise eyes fixed on Naruto. The giant gourd on his back seemed to hum with latent power. "The songstress, the one with the mismatched hair," Gaara said, his voice a dry rasp. "When she sang during your battle with the wardens, I heard it. All the way in Suna." He touched his chest. "I felt something. A quietening of the voice in my head. For a moment, my mother was silent." He looked at Naruto, a flicker of something akin to empathy in his gaze. "I am told they have taken her. That they have silenced her. A world without that song is a less pleasant world to live in. The Kazekage offers his aid." Naruto nodded, a silent acknowledgement of the unexpected, powerful alliance. The Jinchuriki of the One Tail, a boy who understood what it was to have a monster inside you, was on their side. They spent the next day planning, a frantic, desperate race against the clock. The plan was twofold. Phase 1, a large-scale, brute force infiltration. Jiraiya and his army of toad summons, along with Gaara and a contingent of elite Suna shinobi, would launch a massive assault on the gateway location Jiraiya triangulated, a barren, rocky plain miles from any civilization. Their goal was not to win, but to draw the full attention of the Warden's automated defenses and ground troops. Phase 2 was Naruto. He, along with Kakashi, would use the chaos of the main assault to slip through the gateway unnoticed. Their mission was simple: find Yuta, and get the hell out. The final piece of the puzzle was the most dangerous, Sasuke. "He will be there," Kakashi said grimly, looking over a hand-drawn map. "He's their new prized soldier. He'll likely be guarding whatever prison they're holding Yuta in. He's the final boss of this mission, Naruto." Naruto's expression was hard as stone. "I know." The gateway tore open with a screech of tortured reality, a swirling vortex of purple and gray energy above the rocky plains. As Jiraiya had predicted, the Warden's response was immediate. The sky filled with automated defense drones, sleek, silver ships that spat beams of energy. Squads of warden soldiers phased in, forming disciplined ranks to defend the portal. Showtime! Jiraiya roared, standing atop the massive head of Gamabunta. Let's give them hell, boys. The battle began, a cataclysmic clash of toad summons and futuristic technology, of sand tsunamis and energy shields. It was the chaos Kakashi and Naruto needed. They moved along the edge of the battle, shadows in the twilight, and slipped through the vortex seconds before it began to destabilize. They arrived in a place that made no sense. They were in a vast, white corridor that seemed to stretch into infinity in both directions. The air was cold, sterile, and silent. Gravity felt optional. This is the Chrono Keeper's fortress, Kakashi whispered, his Sharingan spinning as he tried to process the impossible architecture. Stay sharp. There's no telling what defenses he has here. They moved quickly, silently. The fortress was a labyrinth, but it was a logical one. The layout followed a pattern that Kakashi's Sharingan could, after a few wrong turns, begin to decipher. They were heading toward the center, toward what felt like the core of the structure. They rounded a corner and found him. Sasuke stood there, guarding a single, massive white door. He wasn't wearing warden armor, but his familiar blue shirt and white shorts. He looked calm, centered. He had been waiting for them. I knew you would come, Naruto, he said, his voice echoing in the sterile hallway. Your emotional responses are so predictable. Sasuke, Naruto said, his voice low. The beat in his chest was a slow, steady, determined rhythm. Thump. 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 Let me pass. I can't do that, Sasuke replied, his Mangekyo flaring to life. I am preserving the future. You are a threat to it. Kakashi stepped forward, his hand on the hilt of his kunai. Sasuke. This has gone far enough. Don't make us do this. This isn't your fight, Sensei, Sasuke said, his gaze locked on Naruto. This has always been between us. The chaotic anomaly versus the principle of order. Only one of us can walk away. Naruto looked at Kakashi. Go, he said. Find Yuta. He's right. This is my fight. Kakashi hesitated, torn. But he saw the look in Naruto's eyes, the unshakable resolve. He nodded grimly and blurred past them, heading for the door. Sasuke didn't try to stop him. His focus was entirely on Naruto. The two rivals faced each other in the infinite white corridor. The air crackled with tension. You're not fighting with joy anymore, Sasuke observed, a hint of curiosity in his voice. The beat is different. Slower. Angrier. I'm not fighting for my own happiness, Naruto said, a strange, calm smile touching his lips. It wasn't the manic grin of Gear 5th. It was something new. Something more dangerous. I'm fighting for hers. He activated his power. The white steam billowed around him, his clothes and hair bleaching to white. But the laughter was gone. The manic energy was replaced by a deadly, focused calm. He bounced on the balls of his feet, his movements fluid, impossible, but now imbued with a clear, sharp purpose. He shot forward, a white blur. The rematch had begun. It was a battle of philosophies. Sasuke's movements were perfect, geometric, each strike and block a model of efficiency. His new Mangekyo allowed him to perceive and predict Naruto's attacks with terrifying accuracy. He was a bastion of cold, hard logic. But Naruto was no longer just chaos. His Nika form, now driven by a singular, selfless will, was something else. He was the exception to every rule. When Sasuke predicted a right hook, Naruto's arm would contort at an impossible angle and hit him from the left. When Sasuke erected a perfect Susanoo ribcage to defend himself, Naruto didn't try to break it. He turned the floor beneath Sasuke to rubber, causing the entire construct to lose its footing and topple over. He wasn't trying to overpower Sasuke. He was trying to get through to him. Is this what you wanted, Sasuke? Naruto yelled, dodging a volley of Amaterasu flames by literally peeling his body off the floor like a sticker and slapping himself onto the ceiling. This perfect, silent world. Is this cold cage really better than what we had? He launched himself from the ceiling, his fist stretched back. We were a team. We were friends. Rivals. It was messy and loud and we fought all the time, but it was real. His punch wasn't aimed at Sasuke's body. It was aimed at the ground in front of him. The impact, a booming doom, sent a shockwave through the floor, shattering Sasuke's footing and forcing him back. You talk about order. Naruto landed, his white hair flowing around him. Look at you. You betrayed your home. You helped kidnap Yuta. You're working with the guy who wants to delete our entire world. Does that sound like order to you? Or does it just sound like you traded one master for another? His words were like kunai, finding the cracks in Sasuke's cold, logical armor. The memories flickered in Sasuke's mind, unbidden, Team 7's bell test. Sharing a lunch bento with Naruto because he'd forgotten his. The look of fierce, idiotic loyalty in Naruto's eyes. These were chaotic, messy, emotional memories. And they hurt. Silence. Sasuke roared, lashing out. His Susanoo arm manifested, grabbing Naruto and slamming him into the wall. You know nothing of true peace. True peace requires sacrifice. It requires control. Naruto, pinned against the wall, just looked at him, his golden-ringed eyes filled not with anger, but with a profound sadness. No, Sasuke, he said softly, his voice cutting through Sasuke's rage. You're wrong. You don't want to save the world. You're just lonely. As lonely as I was. And you're so scared of being hurt again that you'd rather live in a world with no connections at all. He reached up with his free hand and touched the ethereal purple arm of the Susanoo. I'm not going to let you stay lonely, team, he whispered. And he pushed. Not with strength, but with his will. He channeled the core of his power, the desire for freedom, into Sasuke's construct. The Susanoo, a manifestation of Sasuke's will and chakra, flickered. For a moment, Sasuke saw not Naruto, but himself as a small, weeping child, alone in the empty Uchiha compound. The Susanoo shattered. Sasuke stumbled back, gasping, clutching his head. The cold logic of the Chrono Keeper was at war with the chaotic, emotional truth of Naruto's words. He was broken, conflicted, his perfect order shattered by an act of radical empathy. Naruto stood before him, his Nika form receding slightly, the steam lessening. He didn't press the attack. He just waited. Sasuke looked up, his Mangekyo flickering, his face a mess of confusion and pain. He looked at Naruto, then at the large white door behind him. He made a choice. Not a choice for order or chaos, but a choice of his own. He tossed a small, crystalline keycard to Naruto. She's in the central spire. The chamber is shielded by a causality lock. That will bypass the primary sequencer. He didn't join Naruto. He didn't apologize. He just turned and walked away, disappearing into the infinite white hallway. His journey was not over. It was just beginning again, on a new, lonelier path of atonement. Naruto watched him go, then clenched the keycard in his fist. Kakashi had likely run into trouble. It was up to him now. He turned to the door, his jaw set. The slow, steady beat in his chest began to quicken, not with joy, but with the thunderous, gathering power of a coming storm. He was no longer just a vessel for Joy Boy. He was Naruto Uzumaki. And he was coming to save the woman he loved. Chapter 8, Our New Genesis. The door slid open into darkness, a stark contrast to the sterile whiteness of the fortress. The air within was heavy, cold, and thrummed with a low, oppressive energy that felt like a silent scream. Naruto stepped through, the keycard in his hand dissolving into dust. The door hissed shut behind him, plunging him into near total blackness. He was in a vast, circular chamber. In the center, suspended in a web of shimmering, golden light, was Yuta. She was unconscious, her body held limp, her hair fanned out around her like a halo of red and white. The light pulsed in time with the oppressive hum, each pulse seeming to drain the very color from her. She looked paler, more translucent than before. They weren't just holding her, they were unmaking her. Standing before the containment field, his back to Naruto, was the Chrono Keeper. He hadn't turned. He didn't need to. "I confess, I am surprised," the Chrono Keeper said, his voice calm and resonant in the cavernous room. "I had calculated a 97.4% probability that Uchiha Sasuke's newfound zeal for order would be sufficient to neutralize you. It seems the chaotic variable of your emotional connection was more potent than my models predicted. A fascinating, if inconvenient, miscalculation." Naruto's Nika form flared back to life, the white steam a beacon in the oppressive darkness. The drums of liberation beat a steady, defiant war chant. Doom dada. "Let her go," Naruto said, his voice low and dangerous, layered with the echo of his divine power. The Chrono Keeper finally turned. His face held no anger, no surprise. Only a sort of weary disappointment, the look of a teacher whose star pupil has failed a critical exam. "I cannot do that," he said simply. "Her power signature is being scrubbed from this reality's foundational code. It is a delicate process. And you, child of joy, are the final piece of the equation. Your power, too, must be unwritten." He raised a hand, and the battle began. But it was a battle unlike any Naruto had ever fought. The Chrono Keeper didn't throw a punch or launch an energy blast. He simply gestured. Naruto shot forward, his fist the size of a car, ready to bring it down in a devastating blow. Gomu Gomu no, he swung. And missed. Completely. His fist sailed through empty air, even though the Chrono Keeper hadn't moved an inch. Naruto stumbled, thrown off balance by the unexpected lack of impact. "Your attack did not miss," the Chrono Keeper explained, as if correcting a flawed thesis. "It simply never had a chance of hitting. I have exerted a minor causal revision. In the new timeline, the one we currently occupy, you tripped over your own feet a moment before you launched your attack. Your mind has not yet caught up with the revised sequence of events." As he spoke, Naruto felt a phantom sensation, the memory of a stumble he'd never experienced. It was disorienting, nauseating. He was fighting a man who could edit reality in real time. "That's cheating," Naruto yelled, shaking his head to clear it. He pushed off the floor, launching himself into the air, his body twisting like a gymnast. "It is not cheating," the Chrono Keeper countered, his tone patient. "It is control. The ultimate control. The power to enforce not just order, but narrative." He gestured again. Naruto suddenly found himself back on the ground, at the exact spot he had started from, trapped in a 1-second time loop. He launched himself into the air, only to find himself instantly back on the ground. Again and again, he began the motion, a prisoner of a single, repeating moment. It was infuriating, a cage built of time itself. "You cannot break a law that has already been written," the Chrono Keeper said, a hint of pity in his voice. "This is the futility of chaos, child. It flails and struggles against the inevitable, against the perfect, repeating pattern of order." Stuck in the loop, seeing the Chrono Keeper's calm, superior face, Naruto felt a surge of pure, Nika-fueled inspiration. He couldn't break the law. But what if he just ignored it? On the next loop, as he began his launch, he did something utterly absurd. He looked to his left, where there was nothing but empty space, and he reached out. His rubbery arm stretched and his fingers found purchase on the invisible, conceptual frame of the time loop itself. With a grunt and a comical pop, he literally pulled himself out of the looping sequence, landing on the floor a few feet to the side, free. The Chrono Keeper's eyebrow twitched. It was the first sign of genuine surprise he had shown. He had trapped Naruto in a sentence, and Naruto had escaped by climbing out through the punctuation. Impossible, he murmured. That violates the principle of narrative cohesion. You think too much. Naruto declared, a wide, manic grin finally breaking across his face. He wasn't just fighting anymore. He was playing. He was being more ridiculous, more unpredictable, than the laws of causality itself. He took a deep breath and his entire body went flat, two-dimensional like a piece of paper. He fluttered to the ground and then shot across the floor, sliding under a causal wave the Chrono Keeper sent at him. He popped back into 3 dimensions behind the Chrono Keeper, his arm stretched back for another punch. The Chrono Keeper, forced to react, swiped his hand through the air, creating a dozen shimmering temporal copies of himself. Naruto's punch passed harmlessly through one of them. You cannot hit what exists at multiple points in the same moment, the copies all said in unison. Then I'll just have to grab them all. Naruto yelled. He didn't punch. Instead, his arms split into a dozen smaller, thinner arms, each one shooting out like a rubbery net. Gomu Gomu no Time Hopper Net. He ensnared all the copies at once. But instead of pulling them, he took the causal energy attacks the Chrono Keeper was now throwing at him, shimmering blades of solidified before and after, and, with a series of deft, impossible movements, he began to tie them into a knot. He was literally tying time in knots. The Chrono Keeper was being pushed back, not by force, but by sheer, unadulterated absurdity. His perfect, logical power had no answer for a being who refused to obey logic. But he had one last, desperate gambit. He channeled his power not at Naruto, but at the containment field holding Yuta. The golden light intensified, and Yuta's form flickered violently. Cease this nonsense, the Chrono Keeper commanded, his voice finally losing its calm and gaining a sharp edge of desperation. Or I will accelerate the scrub. She will be erased completely. Naruto froze. His Nika form wavered. The Chrono Keeper had found his one weakness. He could risk his own existence, but not hers. And in that moment of hesitation, the Chrono Keeper struck, unleashing a focused beam of pure causality, not at Naruto, but at the seal on his stomach. He wasn't trying to kill Naruto, he was trying to break the vessel. The beam hit, and Naruto screamed, a sound of pure agony as 2 different, divine-level powers warred within him. The energy of Nika and the hateful chakra of the Kyuubi destabilized under the assault. But the Chrono Keeper's gambit had an unintended consequence. The feedback loop of energy, a chaotic storm of joy, hate, and order, pulsed outward, striking Yuta's containment field. The field shattered. Yuta fell, her body limp, caught just before she hit the ground by a cushion of air created by the last dregs of her own power. She was conscious, but barely. Her throat felt like it was full of sand. Sasuke's Mangekyo ability, the law of silence, was still in effect. She couldn't speak. She couldn't sing. She saw Naruto, writhing on the ground, his Nika form flickering violently as the Chrono Keeper pressed his attack. She saw the pain on his face, the agony he was enduring. And she knew she had to do something. She couldn't sing. She couldn't make a sound. But a song wasn't just words. It wasn't just a voice. It was a melody. It was a rhythm. It was a feeling. She closed her eyes, focusing all of her will, all of her love for the boy on the floor. She couldn't project her voice, but she could project her heart. She began to hum. It was a silent hum, a purely mental melody broadcast on a wavelength of pure emotion. A tune that only one person in the universe could hear. It was their song. The duet of liberation. Naruto heard it. In the midst of the roaring chaos in his soul, he heard her melody. A clear, beautiful, unwavering line of hope. It was the anchor he needed. It was the rhythm for his heart. The drums of liberation, which had been faltering, exploded with renewed vigor, perfectly in sync with her silent song. Doom-dada doom-dada. Naruto roared, pushing himself to his feet. The Chrono Keeper's beam of order was pushed back, shattered by the combined, harmonious power of the boy who was a drum and the girl who was a song. "It's over," Naruto said, his voice calm, his Nika form now stable and burning brighter than ever before, fueled by Yuta's melody. But he didn't attack. He looked at the Chrono Keeper, at his face, which was now a mask of fear and disbelief. And in that moment, Naruto saw not a cosmic tyrant, but a man consumed by his own trauma. A man just as lonely and scared as Sasuke had been. He remembered Kurama's words. It is the will to bring joy to others. Not just to friends. To everyone. In the ultimate act of liberation, Naruto reached out. His hand, glowing with the gentle white light of his power, didn't fly toward the Chrono Keeper's chest. It moved slowly, peacefully. He wasn't trying to punch him. He was trying to reach him. The Chrono Keeper, exhausted, his power depleted, couldn't stop it. Naruto's hand gently touched his forehead. He didn't attack. He shared. He channeled his power, the essence of Joy Boy, directly into the Chrono Keeper's mind. He showed him not the end of his world, but the beginning. He showed him the memory of Xylos, his home planet, but this time, he infused it with his own power. He showed him the beauty of imperfection, the joy of a clumsy dance, the laughter that comes from a failed experiment, the warmth of a community rebuilding together after a disaster. He showed him that true order isn't a rigid, unchanging crystal. It's the dynamic, resilient, ever-evolving pattern of life itself. He was liberating him from his own pain. The Chrono Keeper gasped, his eyes wide. He saw his world not as a monument to a tragic failure, but as a testament to a life that had been lived, full of chaotic, beautiful, imperfect moments. A single tear traced a path down his cheek. The rigid, cold ideology that had defined him for millennia shattered. "I see," he whispered, his voice trembling. He willingly let his power go. The fortress around them began to dissolve, the white walls fading into nothingness. The oppressive hum ceased. The battle outside had ended. The warden forces had vanished the moment their leader's will was broken. Jiraiya, Gaara, Kakashi, and the others stood amidst the quieted battlefield, staring at the spot where the vortex had been. A gentle light appeared, and from it, 3 figures emerged, a weary Naruto, holding a still weak Yuta in his arms, and a changed, somber Chrono Keeper. The Chrono Keeper addressed them all, his voice no longer amplified, but human. "The silent wardens are disbanded. Our crusade was a miscalculation." He looked at Naruto. "Your power is a great and dangerous thing, Naruto Uzumaki. But the variable I failed to account for was love. Perhaps that is the law that supersedes all others." He then looked at Yuta, who was leaning heavily on Naruto. He raised a hand, and a gentle silver light enveloped her. The cold, geometric pattern of Sasuke's Mangekyo appeared before her and shattered into dust. "The law of silence is revoked," he said. Yuta took a shaky breath and coughed. She touched her throat. "Naruto," she whispered, her voice raspy but real. It was the most beautiful sound in the world. With a final nod, the Chrono Keeper faded away, gone to contemplate a universe far more complex than he had ever believed. Sasuke Uchiha was never seen in Konoha again. Stories would surface over the years, whispers of a lone wanderer with a powerful Sharingan, a silent guardian who appeared in places of great imbalance, sometimes fighting for order, sometimes for freedom, forever seeking a balance he had yet to find. Naruto and Yuta returned to a village that no longer knew what to make of them. They were not heroes, not demons. They were a reality the world had to learn to live with. Their power was a fact, as undeniable as the sky. The fear was still there, but now it was mixed with a deep, profound sense of awe. Months later, the scars on the village had begun to fade into the landscape of its history. Naruto and Yuta sat on the head of the fourth Hokage, their favorite spot, watching the sun set. The village below was peaceful, bathed in the golden light of dusk. Naruto's powers had stabilized. He was no longer a slave to his emotions, he was the conductor of his own inner rhythm. The drums of liberation beat softly in his chest, a contented, steady pulse. Yuta had recovered her voice, but she no longer felt the need to sing for the world. Her concerts were now for an audience of one. She leaned her head on Naruto's shoulder and began to sing, a new song, a quiet, gentle melody that wasn't about grand dreams or new jeanses. It was a simple love song about a boy with the sun in his heart, a boy who laughed in the face of logic, a boy who had shown her that the most beautiful music is a duet. Naruto closed his eyes, listening. The drums of liberation in his chest shifted, their rhythm perfectly harmonizing with her melody. Their future was an unwritten sheet of music, full of unknown verses and terrifying crescendos. But they would face it all, together. Their love was the song, and their new genesis was just beginning. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.